Oh, I was muted. Silly me. So embarrassing, right? Always to forget to unmute my mic. Anyway, so I finished writing the article for part 16 yesterday night. I figured initially I would do it on stream, but if I did it on stream, I wouldn't have time to record the footage for part 16. So here it is. If you are a Silver Patreon, you will be able to access the article in advance. It's not complete. I mean, it's mostly complete. It's just, you know, I haven't done the table of contents, and otherwise everything else is pretty much complete. Explanations are all there. So I'm just gonna run through the article and cover what we are gonna be doing for part 60. So where do we start? So I have restored my project all the way back to, well, not really restore because I always had the weapons, right? Even when I was doing part 15, I had the weapons. So I deleted the weapons so I could recreate them. Only thing I didn't delete are the special effects because they take pretty long to create and we already have videos for the special effects. So you are gonna have to watch the videos. If there is a good Samaritan who is willing to convert the video into a forum post, that would be great as well, for those of you who perhaps are not very fond of watching videos and just like to follow articles. So I've restored the project all the way back to just having 2 weapons, just like in part 15. And there are a couple of things we're gonna cover for part 16. Okay, let me just set up the weapons on the characters first. So I deleted my new weapons, but I don't think I removed the weapons here. So let me just remove them. And then for the passives, right? Let me just remove Pomerola as well. We'll recreate it later over the course of the video, right? So I can cover part 16 in its entirety. So after this is done, I will release the project files for part 16 as well. It will be linked to the blog article, and then I'll release the blog article probably for free. I haven't thought of, yes, it's gonna be for free. Alright, it's gonna be for free, alright, until the video comes out, just like part 15. So after today, I'll release the article, I'll release the project files, and then the video will come soon. Probably, hopefully end of next week. 16 is a lot, part 16 is a lot shorter, so it's a lot more achievable for us to do the video in just 1 week, right? So let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to bring your attention to is that a very kind viewer of our videos, he watched part 15 and he noted a couple of bugs with part 15. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to look at the errors that he's mentioned, and from there, let's see, where is the part 15 video? Survivors part. Survivors in green. There we go. So let's find part 15. So for the rest of you, right, if you be so kind, if you find bugs with our stuff, to list the bugs on our comments for us, that would be fantastic. Because if you list the bugs for us, then we can go ahead and fix them in a future part of the video, right? So that would be highly appreciated. So a couple of issues that he's listed. So 1 and 2 are valid issues. 3 is just because he forgot to remove the inventory manager. 4, I couldn't create the bug. I'm not sure what he's referring to. So in part 16, we're gonna fix issue 1 and 2. So issue 1 is basically if you were using our old system, or rather, sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about when I say old system. if you are, let me just remove the extra characters here. Because we're not supposed to have the extra characters yet. Right? This is for part 16. So if you finish off part 15, right, the code that we've created in part 15 made it so that if you fully level a weapon, right, the weapon will reappear in your level up screen. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm gonna just temporarily, I'm gonna set the knife to be level 2, to have 2 levels. I mean, so the knife has 2 levels here, right? So if the knife has 2 levels, it means that you level it 2 times, it cannot level up anymore after that. So if you start with the knife has 1 level, right? And then let's have some enemies spawn. So if I level up the knife to level 2, this reaches its max level. And when the knife is at its max level, what happens is that I think I fixed the bug. But the bug shouldn't... Okay, give me a moment. Bug is not appearing on my side, but it should be appearing on your side. Perhaps because... Did I revert my project back? Okay, you know what, let me do this all over again because I forgot to revert my project back to before the bugs were fixed. So let's redo everything, right? Let me just do a quick reversion. So we're gonna go and do a hard reset of our project all the way back to before bugs were fixed. Right here, and let me just look through the files, and I probably have to re-delete my weapons as well. Much ado about nothing, right? So we are back to having select knife character, select garlic character, but we still have a bunch of weapons because I put the extra weapons in part 15's project files as well. So after part 15, you should only have the projectile, the weapon data, and the aura weapon. Sorry, projectile weapon I mean. So you should have only an aura weapon, a projectile weapon, a weapon file, and a weapon data file, right? And you also should, for the prefabs, sorry, not the prefabs, for the scriptable objects, you shouldn't have all the extra weapons as well. So we've only created so far the garlic and the knife. No weapon evolution. We have a system there, but we don't have a weapon evolution set up for any of the weapons. And for passives, we only have spinach and wings, right? We don't have Pomerola. So where were we? Yes, so let's try this out. I'm gonna remove the extra weapons. So what I'm doing here is I'm just restoring my project back to how your project state should be on part 15, and then we're gonna start going through part 16 from there. Removing the extra weapons so that you can recreate them, rather so that I can recreate them on the video, record it. And if you don't mind, just let me save a copy of the project on my computer so that we can always use this state of the project whenever we need to. Okay, I think we are ready. So let's do this again for ease of recording. Hi Patrick. There is a skip from episode 14 to episode 15. So episode 15, right, is a weapon system revamp. So basically, in the old weapon system that we have, it was very difficult for us to create new weapons. If you were to, because every weapon has 8 levels, right? For example, so if you have 8 levels, you would have 8 weapon data scripts. Weapon scriptable objects, and then you would have 8 weapon prefabs. So there's a lot of files, and what part 15 does is it obsoletes some of the older code that we have for the weapon system, and then it files it in a different folder, and then we are creating new scripts to accommodate our new weapon system. So was part 15 unclear? Like there's an article and a video, right? So because there isn't any skip, so the only thing that we added in the part 15 project is there was this article about mobile compatibility where we added a joystick, and that's about the only thing I've added between part 14 and part 15. Let me just show you the article and the video. So this is the series page, and then all the way at the bottom here we have part 15. Before part 15, we just have a little short article on implementing mobile compatibility where we added a little joystick here. That's the only gap between 14 and 15. There are some extra weapons that I'm covering in part 16 that are inside part 15's project files. But otherwise, there isn't a, at least from my perspective, there isn't a jump. But if you feel like there is a jump, let me know what's missing, and then I will try my best to cover the gap for you. Alright, so thanks for the feedback. Really appreciate it. So I was a little hesitant as well when I was doing part 15 because I was trying my best to make it feel that there was as little of a gap as possible. Yeah, so let me know how you feel about it. Okay, so let's move on and let's do part 16. So where was I? Okay, so yeah, so I finished the article of part 16 last week, yesterday, and the first thing that we're gonna do is to fix a couple of bugs. So thanks to Autumn Maple on YouTube for pointing out these bugs to us. First bug that we have with the part 15 weapon system is that if you fully level your weapon, so over here what I've done is I have set the knife so that it has a maximum of full levels. Alright, so this means that if I pick up the knife twice, it's gonna max out the knife, and then it's not gonna be able to spawn anymore. What's gonna happen though is that if you have only 2 weapons and 2 passives, this will be pretty obvious to you. If I level up the knife to its maximum, and if I level up again and pick up the knife again, right, I will be able to get the knife one more time. See that? Which is a problem to say the least, right? Because you can't have a weapon be obtained twice. See that? So now you can just get infinite knives after the first knife, which is a problem, and this problem is actually caused by a very small bug that I have in the play inventory script. That's the new inventory script that we've created for the new weapon system, and the error is actually right here. So if you scroll all the way down to apply upgrade options, you will find, let me just turn down the music volume a little bit, you will find that there is this part here that checks through every upgrade options, every one of the upgrade options that we have. That's the UI slot. So we have 4 slots, right? So this will look through the 4 slots that we have on the UI in the main menu, in the game scene. So it looks through all 4 of them and randomly selects either a weapon or a passive to fill up these slots with. So what's happening here is that okay, so there are two upgrade types. One of them is an active upgrade, weapon upgrade, and the other one is a passive weapon upgrade. So the codes are mostly the same, except that one of them selects a random weapon and one of them selects a passive weapon. So for both parts, right, there are two modes of weapon selection. One is you select the leveled up version of the weapon, and the other is you select just the base level of the weapon. So clearly, if the weapon is leveled up, we will pick the leveled up version of the weapon, and we will pick the level up tooltips and all that stuff instead of the base description and the base name of the weapon. So if you recall in our weapon data, right, the weapon data contains data about the base stats, which is level 1, and then it contains data about how the weapon grows. So level 2 grows a little, and then increases the number of knives for the knife, for example. Level 3 increases damage, and so on and so forth, right? So the descriptions are different for each level. And then this code here picks whether we want to show the level up information or we want to show the base level information. So if we find what's going on here is that if we find that we already have the weapon that we are selecting, then we will treat it as the weapon is being leveled up. So then if the weapon is being leveled up, it is only able to be leveled up if it's below the max level, right? If the current level is equal to the max level, then we cannot level it up anymore. So a couple of things are done over here, and then this sets the level up stats. So if the weapon is already at the max level, then we do not get here. So then we do not set the stats we do not set the level up stats for the weapon. So what's happening here is that if we do not level up the weapon, if the weapon is not being leveled up, the code will actually come here, and then we will assign the weapon base stats. So the base stats, base description, base sprite, everything. So the problem here is that when the weapon is at the max level, we set some variables wrong, because when the code comes here, right, its level up should always be true. So all we gotta do is just make sure level up is true, so that we don't spawn another copy of the weapon here. Because if level up here is false, then the code comes here after finishing the code on top. It comes here, and then if level up is false, and then we will show level 1 of the weapon. So we gotta set level up equals to true, and then we gotta disable the upgrade UI. So we gotta do this for both the passive section as well as the active section. So again, what we are doing is we are disabling the weapon, and then we are disabling also, and we are setting the level up flag correctly so that the level 1 of the weapon doesn't show. So by setting this to true and then by uncommenting this part here, if you were to play the game again, you will see that the issue is now fixed. So it's just a small oversight that we had, or rather that I had, when I was coding the play inventory. So if we were to try and level up the knife all the way, now once the knife is fully leveled up, I will no longer get knives anymore when I level up. So this is a pretty big issue, because now you can't get multiple copies of the same weapon, right? Which is kind of like a core thing in Vampire Survivors. Otherwise you will be able to get like knives and knives and knives, and then you stack, and then things will become a little imbalanced. So that's the first issue. So second issue. Okay, so second issue is that, okay, so in the article, which is gonna be free for probably the next 21 days or something, it's pretty clearly explained the changes and why the changes are made. And then, so just one thing to take note of, I don't know how I should announce this, but a couple of weeks ago I made a change to the blog, so that when you click on the code here, it will copy everything, and then also it doesn't copy the parts that are cancelled out. So this makes it a lot easier for you to trace the changes. So if you don't know of this feature already, please give that a try. Though I highly recommend when you're following our article or videos to manually change your code, because this gives you a better sense of what's happening. Of course, when I'm recording, I'm just gonna copy and paste the codes from the blog. But the whole point of coding, as I like to tell people who are learning coding, so I'm a lecturer at a university somewhere, right? So my students, I always tell them, well, you gotta understand what we are doing in class. You can't just be copying, but because a lot of them just like copy my code, but they don't understand what's happening. So yeah, so if you do it manually, you edit the code manually, it helps you understand a little bit better. And once you understand how the code works, then you can start making your own code, and that's where you really level up as a programmer. So that's the first issue. It's just a couple of changes. Second issue is also pointed out by Autumn Maple. So he mentions that the garlic aura does not apply for level 1. So maybe let me just show this to you, why this happens. So for the garlic aura, right, notice that when we create the weapon, we can set the area of the weapon. So the area is basically just the multiplier for the weapon. So if I were to set, say, the area of the garlic to be, say, to increase by 2. Okay, so for level 2, right, you will see the garlic will grow in size. So it'll be 1 here plus 2 here. So then the garlic's area becomes 3 at level 2. So the garlic starts off very small, right? This is just the size of the prefab that we've created the garlic at. So if we increase the level of the garlic, because the garlic's area is 2, total area is 3, so you will see the garlic becomes much bigger. Yeah. So the problem that our viewer pointed out is that the area, right, if you set the base area to be, say, 3, for example, it doesn't apply to the weapon, which is pretty silly, right? So the level 1 doesn't apply. Yeah. And it's a really simple fix. So for this one, I can just point you to the blog over here. So this is the line that actually allows us to apply the area of the garlic to the aura. So whenever the garlic weapon levels up, we have to modify the aura size by modifying its scale. So we do it during level up. So we can't just do it during level up, because in our weapon scripts, there is a function called onEquip that fires every time we obtain a weapon, and then there is another function called onUnequip that activates when we drop a weapon. So right now there is no way to drop a weapon in Vampire Survivors, but I just left the system there just in case. In the future, you know, let's say some of you, let's say when you're using our code, you want to have the option to drop items. Yeah, so he suggested to just add the following line to the onEquip function inside the aura weapon to apply the area to the garlic. So this is a good catch. It's a very small detail, but it's an important detail nonetheless. So again, thanks to Autumn Maple for pointing that out and catching that issue. So I'm gonna do the same thing for my aura weapon as well. So just head over to onEquip and just have to apply, and just type it up, the area of the weapon to the aura object. So current stats, area, current stats, area, current stats, area. So why do we need 3 values? We need 3 values because local scale has X, Y, and Z, right? If you look at our garlic aura prefab here. So our aura prefab here has, let me just drag it out onto the scene and show it to you. So the garlic aura here, you can increase the size, right? And then this actually increases the size of the aura. But then you have to increase the size in all 3 dimensions. Actually 2 dimensions is fine, but you know, it's just easier to put 3 of them at the same time, because the local scale is a vector 3 object. Okay, but because 2D game, so you only need actually X and Y. You don't need Z. But you know, we're just putting it in there just for convenience sake, alright? So when you increase the size of the garlic, notice also that the collider increases as well, so we don't have to modify the collider at all. So just increase the scale and then everything becomes bigger. So this makes it really simple for us to increase the area of the object. And later for the Soul Eater, you're gonna find that it's pretty much the same setup, it's just a different particle effect. So right now the garlic particle effect, there is a video that you can refer to if you want to learn how to create an effect, but we'll cover this more inside the part 16 article itself. So by applying this change, right now if we were to use the garlic and we were to set the stats of the garlic to be higher than 1, right, or lower than 1, the area actually applies. So let's test this out. I'm gonna set the base area stat of the garlic to be 3. So when I play the game, and if I select the garlic character, the area becomes big right away because I've set the garlic's scriptable object stat to have an area of 3 at the beginning. So let me just restore it back to 1 because just now we were just testing it, right? For the knife as well, let me just restore the max level of the knife back to 8. So the first two are pretty simple fixes, right? I hope it's fixes are simple enough. Okay, third one is a strange thing. So let me just show you what I mean by it being strange. So Patrick, I'm glad that you find that my explanation is useful. If you have any questions, just drop a post on the forums if you haven't already. So I'm always looking on the forums, so I'll be there to answer your questions if you need me to. Okay, so the next issue is as follows. Let me just select the random character, right? And let me just kill myself. Or rather, let me just get my play character dead. Killing myself sounds so terrible, right? I'm not gonna kill myself. Never kill myself. Life is fantastic. So if the character dies and the character revives, there will be an issue with the joystick, yeah, and then you will not be able to play the game. This is if you've added the virtual joystick for the mobile compatibility patch that we've rolled out. So just a recap of those of you who don't know what's going on with the mobile compatibility. I don't have the mobile compatibility patch yet. But if you have the device simulator, you download it and then you switch the game mode over to simulator view, you will find that there's a joystick that appears, and then you can use the joystick to control the character in a mobile platform. So just by adding in the game view, right, just by adding the mobile joystick, or rather the virtual joystick, your game automatically becomes, okay, I wouldn't say automatically becomes mobile compatible, but you do get this joystick over here, and then this joystick only appears when you are on mobile devices. So then you just have to make a couple of changes. You can refer to our mobile compatibility video for more information. You just gotta make a couple of small changes to the player movement script, and then your entire game will become mobile compatible. So it's really convenient. That's why I covered that part, because one of our patrons requested for us to port the game over to mobile. At first I thought it was a difficult task, but it turned out to be pretty easy. So that's what I did, because we have a asset package that's upcoming. We published it onto Unity's asset store. It just hasn't gotten published because I think Unity's been pretty busy with a lot of stuff. But if you get this bug, where if you restart the game and the mobile joystick stops working, you can just re-download the package from the virtual joystick pack page over here. It's linked in the article as well. When we create a part 16 video, we'll link it in the video description as well. You can just re-download it. Make sure it's version 0.30. I haven't updated the site, but the version here is 0.30. So as long as your version is the correct one, the error should go away. So it's just a small issue with the virtual joystick code that I fixed, and I don't want to go into the details of it because you know, if I go into the details of it, it's pretty complex and it's gonna take like an hour in itself. So probably in the future, if our virtual joystick pack, if it gets enough eyeballs and it's popular enough, then I can just do a stream, or I can just do a code run through of the joystick pack if you guys are interested. So for the virtual joystick, if you get the issue, just re-download the pack, and then this will fix your issue. The fourth issue that we have is that this requires you to have an eye for detail. Some of our viewers have already mentioned this in the forums. So I will just recreate the issue for you inside our gig. Let me just check that I'm on the correct screen. So if we were to go around and hit enemies, right? You will find that when enemies die, there will be a error over here. So what is this error being caused by? This error is being caused by, or primarily is being caused by the code in our floating text, which let me show you where it is. So in the floating text coroutine, right? So basically, when you hit an enemy, what happens? What happens is that you call the, or rather we call the generate floating text function whenever an enemy gets damaged, and then this takes a string which shows the text that we want to show. It also takes the target that we want to show the text about. So basically what it does is that you find the floating text. I think in part 14 it's already been explained. You find an enemy and then you print the text on top of it, and then you determine how long you want to show the text for and how fast you want the text to float upwards, right? So the function here, basically what it does is it just calls the coroutine. And what the coroutine does is it just spawns the text, and then it moves the text upwards for a certain amount of time, and then it fades away. So basically the code, what it does is it dynamically means we use code to do it. It dynamically creates a game object, dynamically adds a rect transform and a text mesh pro to it, and then we align the text in the center and middle. Center is horizontally aligning, and then vertically aligning, that's middle. And then we set the font size, and etc, etc. And then once everything is done, we actually do a while loop here, and then this while loop here has a wait for end of frame that basically runs every frame. Yeah, so this while loop, we will just wait for a frame, and then it will move the text upwards, and then wait for a frame and move the text upwards. All this happens for as long as the time is less than the duration. So every time this loop runs once and we wait for one frame, we will also add delta time to t. So eventually t will increase to be higher than duration. So once t goes higher than duration, the loop ends. So the problem here is that there will be one frame where t is greater than duration. And if you look at the code here on top, the game object that we create to contain the floating text, right, actually has a timer, and the timer is equals to duration. This is just to make sure that the object doesn't stay forever. So there may be problems where, for example, if we were to accidentally or intentionally disable the game manager for a while, the coroutine stops. So we want to make it so that in the event that the coroutine stops, the text will still exist only for a short amount of time, and then it will disappear itself. So this is why we have a destroy here, and then we put a duration. This is just to make sure that, so for example, if duration is 1, this means that our text, our floating text, can only exist for 1 second. So if the floating text exists for 1 second, and then our loop here, the last time the loop runs, if it's over 1 second, right, then we will have a case where the code is still running, but the floating text isn't there anymore. So if the floating text isn't there anymore, then what we'll get is null reference, because the floating text, this is referring to the rect transform component in the floating text. So if the floating text isn't there anymore, this rect will also not be there anymore. Then you'll get an error. Yeah, so just a simple fix for us would be for us to move the code here all the way down. So basically what it does is that we are trying to offset the text first before we increase the time. If the time is the last thing to be increased, this ensures that our code will never run when t is greater than duration. If I was to put this code on top, it's possible for the code to run, the rest of the code to run when time is greater than duration, which is when our text is already destroyed. Yeah, so it's just a simple reorganizing of the code to the bottom. This will fix the first issue that we have now with the null reference. The other possible cause of a null reference, so if we have a video for null reference exceptions, you can refer to that where I explain more in detail what they are. Essentially what they are is if you have, anytime you have code where you have something dot something. So for example here we have rect dot position, meaning we are accessing the position of the rectangle. So if we do something like this and then the thing that we are trying to access the property of doesn't exist, then we get null reference. So for example, if the rect doesn't exist, we'll get null dot position. It doesn't make sense. And because it doesn't make sense, it gives you a null reference exception. Yeah. So in this line here, there are two possible causes of the null reference. One of it is the rect object. The other one is the target object. Okay, so target refers to the object that has the text above. So the target, in our case here, is going to be the enemy. So when you hit the enemy, right, it's possible sometimes for the enemy to die first before the text disappears. So for example, if the enemy dies over 0.5 seconds, but then, you know, your text, if it shows for 1 second, right, there's going to be half a second where your floating text script is not going to have a target. And then, of course, this causes problems, right? So for that, we just have to check whether the target position, the target still exists. And in the article, there's actually a fix that's offered. Okay, so there are two changes in the code. The first change is, of course, moving the code to the bottom. Let's find where it is. So we move this part to the bottom here. That's the first change. Second change is that we want to replace target position with something called last known position. So if our target is gone, we still want to be able to paste the text somewhere, right? So what this does is that this text always takes the target's position and increases it. But if the target is not there, then we are gonna have to use something else. So before we use the target position, we are just gonna save it inside a variable. Okay, so we will just check if the target exists and save its position. It exists, and we will do. So here we gotta declare a new vector 3 last known position, and then we will just set it to target's position, just for convenience sake. Alright, if the target exists, then we will set the last known position to be equal to the target's position. Alright, so this makes it so that if the target dies, the last known position will still be tagged to where the target dies, so the text will continue to float upwards still. And then finally, we just set the last known position right here. And so finally, just as a fail-safe, I recall that we moved the code from the top to the bottom because we wanted to prevent the rect object from being null. So after I made the move of the code from the top at the top here to the bottom, I found that there was still a null reference exception every now and then for the rect object. So just to make sure that the null reference exception doesn't occur, I'm just checking that if the rect object is missing for whatever reason. So this is just another failsafe to ensure that our code doesn't print null reference exception. So if the rec doesn't exist, we can just put exclamation mark rec. Yeah, so this is not rec. So if the rec doesn't exist, or the rec is not there. So the reason why we do it in such a way is because it is important for us to when we run our code, right, it's important for our codes to not print out null reference exceptions or missing reference exceptions, which are basically a cousin of the null reference exception. Because if your code is filled with errors, right, it becomes harder for you to debug real errors. So whenever you have small errors, it is usually good practice for you to clear these small errors, so that when the big errors come, you're able to see it in your console, as opposed to your console being filled with a lot of just crazy irrelevant stuff, right? And it's just good practice as well, because whenever you have errors, right now these errors may not be causing any problems, but in the long run, these errors may cause you issues. Because if you get an error, that means that something that's not supposed to be happening is happening. Yeah, so if you leave a lot of errors on your console, the issue will catch up with you eventually, which is why whenever I see an error, I just get very bothered and I've got to fix it. So with these fixes that we apply, you should find that these errors should now no longer occur with the floating text. So let me just play this game for a while, and you just look at the console and make sure that no errors occur. So with these fixes, the errors should never occur again, because we will never get to a point where we have a missing reference exception. Yeah, so no more missing reference exceptions. So there are still messages and there are still warnings. These are actually created by ourselves, so they are totally fine. So somewhere later in the series, I'm probably going to remove these warnings as well, because I generally like to keep the console clear, so that I can make use of it whenever I need to. If you have a lot of messages in your console and you don't clear them, then over time it's gonna make it very hard for you to use it when you want to, because you're gonna have to clear all these other messages as well, right? Which can become a hassle. Okay, so these 4 things are debugs that we have fixed in part 16, or that we are gonna fix, or we have fixed them, right? So one more thing I wanted to just bring your attention to is a fix that I posted on the forums for maybe we can just add it to part 16. So it's just a fix on the forums. So for the magnet problem, so you see here we have an issue where if you move in a certain way, or if you move too fast, the gem that the enemy drops, right, will fly past your character. This is a small problem. I say it's small because it doesn't look good, right? So I've actually issued a fix in this topic, so I will probably add this to the part 16 article, and then my editor for the video will cover this part when he's making the part 16 video. So eventually, I think we managed to fix it. He stopped replying. I haven't tried the code, but we're gonna try, and then we're gonna add it part 16. So then we won't have this magnet problem anymore. So the next thing, after fixing all of these bugs, is we are gonna create automatic character selection from the game scene. So one thing that's always bugged me about this project is that we were unable, if you were to play the game from the game scene, right, you just don't get to do it sometimes. And the reason for that is because you get an error, and the error is in the player stats, because the player stats doesn't have a player character assigned. So if I go to debug mode, you will see under player stats here, we need to assign character data, so that player stats can retrieve the stats of the player and then assign them over here. So if you have no character data, then you have no stats to assign, and then the game just doesn't start. So in part 15, we actually tried to fix this issue to no avail. Why I say to no avail? Because in part 15, right, we actually added some code to use resources, find objects of type all, and find all character data files. That didn't really work so well because the resources class doesn't always work. For whatever reason, I'm not very sure how Unity handles their files. I haven't looked into it in depth, and to be frank with you, this was generated by ChatGPT. So what I did was I just posted this code on ChatGPT, and then it just gave me a fix, and then I just modified the fix to my needs, and then the problem was fixed. So the key crux is, instead of using the resources class, ChatGPT advised that I use the asset database class. This is a lot more inefficient because it finds every file in the project. So it actually takes some time, especially if your project is going to be very large. It finds all the assets, and then it makes a list of characters. And what we do is that we check every file, and if the file, we try to load the file, and then if the file is can be loaded as a character data, then we add the character data to the characters list, and then after that we just pick a random character from the characters that we found. So basically, this is changed. This is added to this is modifying the character selector get data function, which is static. So normally what happens is that the character selector is actually only in the menu scene, and then when you select the character, this updates the character selector, so that there is a file that the game scene can use when the game scene gets when the game scene moves on from the menu scene. So because the menu scene sets the character, if we start from the game scene, the character is not set. So if the character is not set over here, if the character is not set, then we just randomly pick a character to use. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna pick a I'm just gonna grab the code here and just drop it into my character selector, and then this should fix the issue. So there is an if Unity editor here. Reason for that is because we only want this code to run if we are playing the game from the editor. Otherwise, we just want to ignore this entire part. It's very important, right? Because otherwise you're gonna have this running in your build, and then this is gonna cause issues. If you have this error where asset database turns red, well, this is just because you have to add a new line here using Unity editor. Yeah, so you gotta use that namespace. Then you should be able to use the asset database class to get all the files in the project. So once this is done, if you go back to the project, you should find that you will be able to play the game from the character from the game scene. Maybe I've missed something because it's still not working for me, huh? Okay, let's see what's going on. Did I save this file? I saved the file. So then what's wrong? Let's see what's wrong. Let's try again and see whether we can rectify it. Okay, so a couple of other things. If you get all these issues, right, it's just because in my files there were... So this is probably just specific to my project, but I have some prefabs in the garlic controller prefab, where I have some missing scripts. So if I go into the garlic controller, you will see there is a missing script here. Just gotta remove this, and in the knife as well. So your error will be specific to the issue to the way that your project is set up. So if I were to remove those two scripts, you'll find that this thing fixes itself, and I'm able to play. Okay, not so much. What am I missing now? So I'm missing also in player stats. This is mentioned in the article as well. In the player stats, okay, there is also this part here, okay, where so whenever you go into the game scene will try and destroy the character selector object. So the menu scene will create a character selector object so that the buttons can assign the character to the character selector. Right? But once we get to the menu scene, we want to delete the character selector. So to that end, you will have to go to the player stats. Then because if you go straight to the game scene, there wouldn't be a character selector object, right? So when the player tries to destroy the character selector object, there will be an error, and then we just have to make sure that this code doesn't run when there isn't a character on the there isn't a character selector in the game. So we just have to check the character selector dot instance is it exists. So what this does is checks if the instance exists. Only if the instance exists, then we try and destroy it. And this will fix the issue that we have over here. And finally, if we were to run the game, we should be able to start playing the game. And the amazing thing about the code over here is that if you don't select the character, it will just randomly pick the character for you. So you will see the starting weapon always changes for the character. So right now it's garlic, but if I were to try hard enough, enough times, I mean, eventually this will switch over to knife. So now it just automatically selects the weapon for me. Okay, eventually I'll get a knife, or if not, then there is a bug in my code. Maybe there is a bug in my code. Then let's see what is the bug in my code. 0 to count. How many characters do I? Oh, I see something in chat. Hi Grippers. ChatGPT is amazing. I was thinking of actually doing an extra stream series where we title something like make a game with ChatGPT. So then I was planning to do a poll, like, do you want to see ChatGPT do a platformer, or you want to see ChatGPT do something else, and then I'll be its avatar, you know. I'll just ask questions and then let it spawn code, and then just plug the code in Unity, and then fill in the blanks with some art. Maybe use Midjourney to generate art assets, and then we'll see what we get from that. I think that would be an interesting stream. Get more viewers for sure. Then those of you who are here because you're here just because you're hardcore about coding, right? You want to learn how to code, and unfortunately that's not something that appeals to the general audience as much. So if we were to do if I was to do a stream where I created a game with ChatGPT, I think it would get a lot more viewers, and I think it'd be more interesting, like be more clickbaity as well. I'm sorry, but it's what works. So you can watch out for that. If I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna be doing it on Friday nights probably. So yeah, so then our Vampire Survivor stream will still continue to exist on Tuesdays and occasionally Mondays, and then Fridays will be ChatGPT. So where was I? I lost my train of thought. So we got the because the garlic always spawns, right? I think that's the problem. So why is the garlic always only the weapon that spawns? We've got to figure that out. We gotta figure that out, because we have both a knife character and a now we get the knife. There we go. So if you play the game from the game scene now, you just randomly get either a knife character or you get a garlic character. And now you get a garlic character. So there was no issue, it was just RNG. Very good RNG or very bad RNG depending on how you look at it. Now we get a knife again. And that about fixes it for that about settles it for part 2 of the article, where we get automatic character selection when we play the game from the game scene. So now that it's done, let's move on to creating the actual weapons itself. So in part 15, I shared the garlic script, but I didn't explain how the script worked. So I'll just quickly run through that over here in this stream. Am I sharing the right screen? Just not sharing the right screen. Okay, so I'll just quickly run through how the garlic weapon works. So the garlic weapon basically consists, as we've mentioned in part 15, it consists of 2 scripts. The first script is the aura script, okay, which we will use later for the soul eater as well. And in the future, if we were to create something like center water is let me just show you. Center water is this. Okay, so it's every couple of seconds, the character will toss a projectile that lands somewhere in the map, and then the map creates an area that damages enemies, right? That can be an aura as well. So we are creating here an aura script, or rather we've created an aura script that will damage enemies over time whenever it cools down. So this aura script is supposed to be used for any weapon that deals area of effect damage over time. So like the Soul Eater would be another application for this, and then of course the Center Water would also be able to use the aura script. So how the aura script works is in the previous iteration that we had for the garlic, right? When we created the garlic in the earlier parts, the way it was implemented was different from how the garlic actually worked. The garlic actually worked more like the Bible. So the Bible spawns every couple of seconds, disappears and spawns again, right? The garlic doesn't actually work this way. The garlic actually, if you stay in its area of effect, right, it's just gonna damage you every 1.3 seconds. Okay, let's say if your garlic is level 1, it's just gonna damage you every 1.3 seconds. And if you're in the area and it cools down, it will still continue to damage you every interval. So the thing about garlic that makes things complicated, I'm just gonna use my amazing art skills to show you in paint. So let's say the aura is here for the garlic, yeah? And if an enemy stays inside here, or rather if an enemy comes inside here, and he comes in at, let's say, 0.5 seconds. So if he comes in at 0.5 seconds, he's gonna be damaged in these intervals. 1.8 seconds, 3.1 seconds, 4.4 seconds, 5.7 seconds, and so on. So you'll notice that the cooldown is 1.3, right? This is why we get these intervals. Another enemy, if he comes in at, say, 0.2 seconds, these are his intervals. .1 and then 5.4 and so on, right? So you see, depending on when the enemy enters the aura, the intervals are different. So you cannot just do something like the old garlic where we just make the garlic appear, then every time it appears, it just deals damage to anything in the area and then disappears and appears again, right? Because if we do it this way, then the enemies all get damaged at the same time, most of the time, right? But our aura here is, our garlic aura here is constant. It's always there. So that means that it kind of runs every frame, and every frame it checks whether enemies are there and tries to damage them if the enemy has, if the garlic weapon's damage cooldown has reached for the enemy. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that for the garlic to work properly, it has to individually track the cooldown of each enemy. Meaning, okay, so because this enemy comes in 0.5 seconds, next time I can damage him is 1.8 seconds. Because this guy comes in at 0.2, next time I can damage him is 1.5, and so on and so forth. So what we are doing with the garlic, with the aura script, because the center water works the same way and the soul eater works the same way, right? What happens is that the aura script just tracks every enemy. So what we do is that here we have a dictionary, and then basically the dictionary is basically just a key value pair. So if you think of a dictionary, so a dictionary is kind of like an array. So we've used arrays, right? Or we've used this, right? So for this, you can have things like 0 will be a certain value, 1 will be a certain value, 2 will be a certain value, and so on. So this allows you to store a list of different objects. A dictionary is a bit different. Because for a dictionary, instead of storing things as numbers, it actually stores things as it actually uses anything else as an index. So for example, I can have enemy 1. I can store, let's say, the cooldown of whatever. Enemy 2, and then it stores, say, a different cooldown. So the special thing about dictionaries is that it doesn't use a number for an index. It can use anything for an index. It can use an enemy for an index. It can use other game objects for index. It depends on how you set up the dictionary. So what we have here in the dictionary is we have an enemy stats. This is just the, and this manages the enemy's health, right? Which is why we're interested in storing enemy stats. So every enemy stat object will refer to a float. So because 10 different enemies will have 10 different enemy stat objects, right? So then here we're just storing the particulars of the enemy, and then this float here stores the cooldown. So what we have this structure here is that for every enemy that we find, we can check whether the enemy has a cooldown currently. And then this is basically a list of enemies to remove from the dictionary, which we will get to later. The key object here is actually the enemy stats. Sorry, it's actually the affected targets dictionary. And what we are doing here is basically in every frame, what we will do is that we will just scan the area of the garlic to see if any enemy is damageable. But before we do that, we will make a copy of all the targets that are affected by the garlic. And then every update, which is every frame, we look through every enemy. And then we try and reduce the cooldown. Yeah, so this pair key here is actually just the enemy stats object. So we're just looking through the affected targets. We're cycling through everything. Okay, so these things exist in a key value pair. Alright, so again, this allows us to link the enemy to the cooldown that he has. So we just grab the enemy's cooldown and we reduce it. And then if the cooldown, which is pair value, the cooldown value is this, and then the key is this. So if the value is less than 0 or the cooldown is less than 0, what we will do is we will try and remove the enemy. Yeah, and then we will try and remove the enemy by just inserting the enemy into this list, targets to unaffected. And then if the cooldown is 0, what we will do is, if the target is inside the targets to unaffect array, then we will remove it. Sorry, the targets to unaffect list, then we will remove it. Otherwise, we will reset the cooldown and damage of the. We will reset the cooldown of the enemy and deal damage to the enemy. So what's going on here is essentially that first, when the enemy cools down, meaning he's ready to be damaged by the garlic again, we have to check whether he's still within range. So it's possible that he's not within range. So how do we check this? So we have also two functions here on trigger enter and on trigger exit. On trigger enter basically adds the enemy to affected targets. And then on trigger exit though doesn't remove the enemy, it just adds the enemy to targets to unaffect. So what's happening here is that we cannot remove the enemy directly when you exit the aura, because if you remove the enemy directly from the targets to affect, from the affected targets, what's going to happen is that it's possible for you to make the enemy enter and leave the aura quickly to deal damage faster than the cooldown. So for example, right, let's say if I have an enemy here. If I have, let's say my aura is this big, and then I have an enemy that's maybe right here. So what I can do is I can just move left and right very quickly, and I can deal damage to the enemy faster than the aura cools down. So what this means is that when an enemy leaves the aura of the garlic, right, I will still have to track the enemy's cooldown, so that if I were to try and game the system and try and leave and enter quickly, the enemy will not get damaged. This is why when we exit, or rather when the enemy exits the aura's range, we will only label the enemy as being a target to unaffect. Yeah? And then when we enter the aura's range, we will always add the enemy to affected targets. That is, if the enemy is already not inside, If he's already inside, we just ignore him. Alright. And then the other thing that we want to check is we want to check whether the enemy is inside the target is to unaffect. Because if the target and if the enemy enters the area, we shouldn't be trying to unaffect the enemy anymore, right? So if the enemy is inside the area, then we will try and do targets to unaffect, and we will remove them from the area, because again, we don't want to try and remove the enemy anymore. So then inside the update code, if the enemy is marked to be removed or marked to be unaffected, then we will only run this when the cooldown finishes. Otherwise, again, we can game the system, right? So if the code comes here, it means that the enemy has cooled down the damage interval and it's still within the aura of the garlic or whatever object it is. So then if it's still within range, then we will, when the cooldown finishes, we will try and damage the enemy again. After damaging the enemy, then we will try to set the cooldown back to another value. So even though it looks like the aura is pretty simple, there are a couple of complexities, and these complexities, even though I'm explaining to you the complexities right now, really when you build aura, what you want to do is just try and create an update loop. Then after that, just start dealing damage to the enemy every X number of seconds. And then all these other arrays and all these things, right? If you look at the stream when I was creating the aura, I just created the damage effect first, and then all these other things were created to fix all the other issues that arise. Like for example, you can game the system by exiting and entering, then all these things are created. So even though I'm explaining the code to you like that, it wasn't created like that per se. Yeah, it was just created with the update function first, and then slowly I added all these little lists, these two lists, to regulate how the damage is done. So I hope my explanation makes sense. And yeah, so if it's a little confusing, it's fine. As long as you know how to use the code here to create other weapons, I think you'll be in a great place. So the article explains all of this stuff, like for example how the old garlic worked. Only had the old garlic appeared and disappeared, so it behaved more like a Bible than it did a garlic. Yeah, but in the Vampire Survivors, the garlic is constantly on, constantly damages enemies in its radius. So the article mentions what I just explained, so you can read through the article again. It'll be available for free after today for about 2 to 3 weeks, so you can just give it a read if you're interested. And then these are the highlights, basically explain again what I just explained. So I hope my explanation makes sense. If you're watching this stream and you have any questions, again, feel free to just clarify them with me in the chat. I will look at the chat occasionally to get a sensing of how everyone is and whether you have any questions and whatnot. So after we have set up the aura script, the next thing that we will want to do is to set up the garlic prefab, which is so the garlic prefab consists of a couple of things. So the garlic prefab is basically an aura that contains a couple of things. It contains the aura script. Aura script is needed because the aura script actually has a current stats. The aura script, by the way, is a weapon effect. Yeah, and the weapon effect basically has a current stats variable. So weapon effects will retrieve their stats from the weapon itself. That's why they are called weapon effects. Alright, so let me just show you the script very quickly. Yeah, there is a weapon here, and then using the weapon we can retrieve the stats of the weapon. And then there is of course the stats of the player as well. And then these two things work together to retrieve the stats. If you look at aura here, how does aura do damage? It deals damage by retrieving the current stats of the weapon, and then basically it uses it to set the cooldown or to get the damage. Yeah, so of course whole system is tied together. Again, this makes it so that if I do all the code for you, then you will just have to enter in your values and modify your weapon scriptable objects to get everything going. With every coding project, this is what you want to do as a coder. You want to try and automate as many things as possible. So then the designers who are going to be using your system to design their levels, they just have to access the inspector and then click on a few values and modify values and stuff. It makes life easier for them, and it makes the designers able to just focus on the design instead of worrying about code. So in the Aura prefab, there should be 4 components: the transform, the Aura, the circle collider, as well as the particle system. So this Aura object, this is how it looks like when you check it out. Yeah, so the animation is provided by the particle system. So I explain more in the video below why I chose to use the particle system as opposed to using you know, a sprite sheet or some other kind of animated media. That's because particle systems are the most efficient at doing this. If you had to animate this, it would take up a lot of space, and you have to draw everything frame by frame as well. Or you know, you can just fade the opacity, but still it's a little cumbersome, which is why I chose to use particle systems. You don't have to set up any new animations, you don't have to set up any new animators. It's just the particle system itself. You change a couple of values and it starts flowing. So in that sense, they are very effective. And I would say the most important components here are the particle system. Actually, everything is important. Collider is important because we have to detect collisions. Aura is important because this determines how much damage you do and when you do the damage, and then the particle system, of course, provides the particle effect. Yeah, without that, then you can't see the garlic, right? Just make sure when you create the prefab that your circle collider is the same size as your effect. Yeah, so if you're watching this as part 16, then I would recommend you pause this video for a little bit and go and watch the other video. I'll put a link to the video as well during the actual part 16 video, so that it's convenient as you're watching for you to just link over to a different video. So with the garlic prefab created, what's going to happen next is that you got to create the Aura weapon script, which again you probably created already in part 15. Aura weapon script is very simple. And we are missing this one small thing, right? Aura weapon script. And what we are missing is are the changes that we've just made to it in the bug fixing section. So we just re-add that. On equip, you should have Aura local scale equals to new vector 3, and then this will be current stats area, current stats area, and current stats area. Small oversight on my part over here. Just update that and then we will get the changes. So let's zip back to where we left off, and I'll just quickly explain the Aura weapon component in case I haven't already. Okay, it's very simple. We just add the Aura when the Aura weapon is equipped, and we destroy the Aura when the weapon is unequipped. So one instance of when the Aura will be unequipped is when you evolve your garlic into a Soul Eater. Then you will have to unequip the garlic weapon, right? Because it transforms into Soul Eater. So then you have to destroy the garlic aura when the weapon is unequipped. So this is why we have this destroy function here. And then on level up, what we do is we just have to update the area of the aura. And that's really about it, because the aura will use the weapon, because the aura is linked to the weapon, right? So the aura is able to retrieve the weapons, say the weapon's damage to deal the damage. So we just need to increase the area of the aura when it levels up. And that's really about it. So it's a bit different from the projectile weapon because it doesn't fire every frame. So you also see this line here that disables the update option. Alright, because the aura weapon doesn't have to run every frame, it just sticks around and it just observes the aura that is created on the player character. And then when the player character drops the weapon, then you destroy the aura. Otherwise, you just increase the area whenever the aura levels up. It's pretty straightforward. Of course, finally, you have to create a weapon data for the garlic. Weapon data creation is it's just, you know, going to your respective folder in the scriptable objects folder, and then just right click, create. Sorry, wrong button. Right click, create, and then let's go to 2D top down roguelike, and then weapon data. And then you can call this. We already have the garlic, so the garlic over here, and then the evolution data, I'll cover this later. And you just gotta enter the respective values. Most important, assign the aura prefab here. You don't have to assign the projectile or the hit effect, but assign the garlic aura here. And assign the stats, and then the description, and then name, of course. And then for each level, you gotta assign the stats as well. But recall that for the level itself, you have to increase, or you have to, the values here are not fixed values, they are increments. So for example, the damage here is 2, it means that the new damage is basically 5 plus 2. Yeah, and then the area, if it's 0.4 here, it means the area of the garlic is increased by 40%. So this will be 1 plus 0.4, this will be 1.4. Yeah, and then so on and so forth. So in every level up, you get differences. For example, here we have cooldown reduced by 0.1, damage here is increased by 1, and here area increased by 0.2, and then damage increased by 1, and so on. Yes, so interesting stuff, right? Okay, so you just set the levels and everything, and you should have a garlic that's ready to go. Of course, finally, to apply the garlic to the game, you will have to go to your player inventory object, and then just make sure the garlic is added into available weapons, and then you should be able to see the weapons on level up. So next weapon is the whip. The whip is one of my favorites because I just like creating the particle effect. So for the whip, right, instead of being an aura, the whip will be a projectile. So first thing you'll need is to create a whip prefab, which I have already created. Fortunately or unfortunately, let me just show you the prefab. The weapons here, projectiles, and the whip program. So just one thing for the whip, right? Again, for the whip projectile, there is a video that you can refer to see how the whip was created. Like the aura, it has a particle system, a collider, and a projectile component. Instead of an aura component, it has a projectile component. So one noteworthy thing about the projectile is that projectiles will also have a rigid body 2D. Again, this is because they gotta fly around the screen and they have to register collisions and stuff. So you make sure that you have the rigid body as well, and make sure that the collider, just like with the aura, is a trigger. Because if it's not a trigger, it will start colliding with stuff and pushing things around. And then for the projectile itself, make sure to set the damage source to owner instead of projectile. So I've explained this earlier in the series, in part 15. I'm not sure if it's covered here. I don't think it's covered in part 16 as well, but you can refer to part 15. Let me just quickly show you part 15's article to show you what I mean by that. So for the whip, it is important that you set the damage source of the whip to the owner. And the reason for that is because the whip projectile is going to cover a large section in front of the owner. So let's say it goes like that. You just copy this image. So the whip is going to be something like this, right? So when you have something like this, the center of the whip is going to be here. So if you have a bat, I think I've explained this in the other video. If you have a bat that's in between the player and the whip, the knockback is actually going to push the knockback is taken from the whip, is actually going to push the bat towards the player. So what you want is that whenever the whip damages something, you always want the center of the whip to be on the player, so that it always pushes the whip. If the center is outside of the character, there will be chances where the enemy is pushed to the player. something that you don't want. So just make very sure that when you set up your whip projectile, you get the projectile's damage source to be owner and not projectile. The rest of the settings here can just remain as their defaults 0, 0, 0 and with no auto. Particle system itself, I cover this inside the article. But one thing that would be good for you to do is for you to duplicate the amount of number of times the whip fully appears. So if we didn't apply this, what's gonna happen is that, let's say I'm gonna go to do texture sheet animation, right? So there may be some instances when the game is playing very fast, right? You may not always see the full whip appear. So let's say if the game runs, because this is 1 frame only, right? So there may be times when you will get effects like this where the whip doesn't fully play. This is because either your frame rate is too slow, or just because your frame rate didn't align with when the big whip happens. So then you will get, the whip doesn't always look good like that, but you want to have the big arc appear always. So if you find that your whip animation looks a little bit thin, you can just go to your texture sheet animation here. Just make some duplicates of whip number 0. Yeah, and then you can set. You can just move everything downwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, and then 1, and then you just put a couple of frame zeros on your sprites. Then this will cause, you see that this will cause this arc here to stay a bit longer. And then what you will end up with is you will end up with a whip effect that will look more apparent as opposed to looking thin like in the screenshot above. So I think this is pretty important. It's just a small improvement over on the particle effect, just to make the whip effect show up more consistently. So finally, we have the whip weapon script, which let me just copy this onto my project, and then I will explain the code from inside the project. So let me create a whip weapon, and let me just pull this up. Visual Studio. So the whip weapon does... Oh, okay, so this is not simple, I'm sorry. I was mistaking this for the X. Okay, the whip weapon, what it does. Maybe I need some help from the article then. Okay, so the knife, right, spawns. How does the knife spawn our projectiles? The knife spawns our projectiles by spawning a knife in the direction that we are moving in. So if you're moving, let's say, to the right and to the top, then the knife will spawn 45 degrees to the right, and so on, right? The whip only has 2 directions, left and right. So because of that, we have to override the attack function in the projectile weapon. The whip, we are making it a projectile weapon because it uses the same cooldown system the knife does. So we don't have to recode the cooldown system, right? We just gotta recode how the projectile spawns. So instead of spawning in 8 directions, you want the projectile to spawn in 2 directions. So in that sense, the parts that are different in the whip projectile or the whip weapon are actually the highlighted sections over here. So the whip, right, another thing to note is that the whip actually, when it spawns, it actually spawns upwards. Do you see that? So we have, let's say we have 4 whips over here, right? You will see that the first 2 whips appear at the bottom and then the last 2 appear at the top. So if you have more and more projectiles, the whips will just keep spawning upwards. So again, I'm going to use my fantastic art skills to illustrate this. So I have a character here, well drawn, right? And then let's say I have the whip. First whip is going to appear here. Second is going to appear higher. It's just going to keep going higher and higher. Yeah. So then we want a way to be able to represent this inside the code. So then our whip first, where does it start? It always starts where we are facing. So if you're facing to the right, the first whip always appears in front. Second one always appears behind. Third one appears in front but a little bit higher. And then the fourth one appears behind but a little bit higher. So with that, we have our logic over here. So the code here is mostly the same, but then we have a little spawn offset and then spawn count. Okay, so we track how many whips have appeared, and then we track how the Y offset. So we just want to push the whip upwards with every subsequent spawn. That's why we have a Y offset here. So then for the spawn direction here, instead of having the spawn direction be in 8 directions and using a last move vector, we only use the X direction. X is just left and right, right? So we convert it to either a -1 or a 1. Math sign converts it to either -1 or 1. And then we multiply it by the current spawn count. What is the current spawn count? Current spawn count is basically the number of whips that have spawned. So for example, if my spawn count is 1, I always want the whip to be in front. When the spawn count is 2, I always want the whip to be behind. So then this logic here checks whether the current spawn count is a multiple of 2. Right? Because every second whip will face behind, right? So if this is a multiple of 2, this will be either the second or the 4th or the 6th or the 8th and so on. So then it's always going to be -1 if it's a multiple of 2, otherwise it's going to be 1, which is going to be forward of us. So we multiply this direction here with this direction here. So for example, if the player is facing to the left, then left will be the forward, right? In this case, left is -1. So -1, and then if it's on the left and then this is the forward direction, it's going to be -1 times 1. This will give us -1, which means our forward direction is left. If we are facing to the right, and this is our first projectile, this will be 1 times 1, so this will face to the right. So this is just a little formula to determine where the whip should appear. So we take into account where the player is facing, together with where the whip is supposed to appear, whether the front or the back. So you multiply these two together, and because of the way math works, you always get the correct direction of the whips facing. So I think I have a table here that breaks it down. Yeah, so this can help you to make sense of this if you find it a little confusing. And yeah, so the article is just what I've explained basically. And once we've determined where the whip wants to spawn, we also modify the spawn offset. What is the spawn offset? If you recall, the spawn offset is when you create a scriptable object for the weapon, right? There is a little spawn variance here. Spawn variance is used in knife because for the knife, you notice when you level it up, we have some spawn variance. The spawn variance allows the knife to spawn roughly a slightly different place every time you spawn. So then you get the knives coming out, but coming out in staggered, right? They don't always come out in a line, and that's because there is spawn variance. So for the whip, we don't want to have any spawn variance, but we allow the spawn variances to happen, and then basically again we just take into account the X. So what we are doing here is we're making sure that if there is spawn variance, we're only taking into account the X. So the Y will not affect the spawn variance. This is because the Y is going to be determined by the whip itself, right? So we don't want the Y spawn variance to affect how the whip works. So after we determine where the projectile will spawn and which direction it will face, either left or right, we can instantiate the projectile. And then once we instantiate it, one important thing is that you have to flip the whip if it's facing to the left, right? So your whip, when it spawns, it cannot always be facing to the right. You have to face it to the left. That is if the player character is facing to the left, right? So if you do this, you are able to flip. Okay, wrong effect. I want the whip, right? So for the whip, here, can actually flip the whip by using -1 or 1. Okay, so it helps to we have one effect and then we can apply it to both directions. I think this is pretty helpful. And then when you flip it, of course the collider flips as well. So if you are planning to create an exotic, say you want to create a polygon collider, you can do it as well. For those of you who are not aware, for 2D games you can create polygon colliders, and these polygon colliders you are able to modify the shape so that it fits your projectile. Okay, it's very versatile, but of course expensive. So you do want to use it sparingly if you decide to use it, but you can use it to create all sorts of wacky shapes. Yeah, like for example here, you see my polygon collider can actually be manipulated so that it fits the size of the projectile. Yeah, so if you want to apply fancy polygon colliders, notice that when you flip, the collider flips together. So this is a really cool thing that you can do, just to make sure that, you know, just to get it so that your whip always faces the right direction without having to create 2 copies of the whip projectile. So once that is done, the whip is done, what else do we have here? So the code for the spawn count is largely the same as the projectile. Takes into account what the projectile interval is, and then it just spawns the projectiles one after another. So this part here works very similar to the knife. The only thing that's different is that if the current spawn count is an even number, meaning that let's say if I'm spawning my second whip, the third whip is gonna have a Y offset that's higher. So then every time we spawn 2 whips, then we will increase the Y offset. That's really just about it. That's the only notable thing that changes, that is different from the knife projectile. So we have the whip weapon that's based on the projectile weapon, but it kind of changes how the attack function works so that we can kind of finagle that code to fit our purposes for the whip a little bit better. So in our case here, the whip is a projectile weapon that spawns a projectile that doesn't move. It just stays where it spawns, and then it just finishes the animation and goes away. Okay, pretty simple thing. So once we've created a whip weapon, you will find that when you create a new weapon data, so let's say whip, you can now select the whip weapon, and then of course you gotta assign a sprite, and so on. So let me just quickly do that. So I'll find a suitable weapon whip. Next level will be, I'll just set as 2 for now. But you know, you want to have your weapons really decked up. Again, refer to the Vampire Survivors wiki for the full stats. So we have, let's search for whip. And then we can just grab the description. Attacks horizontally, passes through enemies. So then we just gotta drop this into the description, and the projectile will be the whip projectile that we've created, right? So that will be under prefabs, and then weapons, projectiles, whip projectile. Drop it here, and then you just gotta key in the values. Like for example, the lifespan is how long it lasts, right? What is the lifespan? Lifespan will be, maybe let's set it to 0.5. I'm not sure what the stat is. Damage is 10, area is 1. Damage is 10, area 1. Variance, I can just put it at 2 so that it does 10 to 12 damage. Speed is 0, right? Because it doesn't move around. So we gotta set it to 0 even though the stats say it's 1. Then we have cooldown. What is the cooldown? Cooldown is 1.35 seconds. Projectile interval is how long between the 2 whips. Then how long before the next whip appears after the first one appears. Right. So let's say if I have 3 whips, it will go 0, 0.1, 0.2. And just that's a 0.1 second wait. Not bad. You can just set any value, I guess. You can see what value was set for the other weapons. I'll just set it to 1 temporarily. Number will be 1 as well, right? When we level up, it will become 2 and 3 and so on. Piercing, you can get from the side. Piercing is how much? Area of effect. So piercing, I can set it to 99. Max instances 99 as well. Haven't implemented this anyway. Yeah, and then let me just add an example level. So level 2. Level 2 of the whip will increase the fire one more projectile. So level 2 is quite straightforward. You don't have to replace any of the projectiles here because they remain the same, or any of the settings here. Just gotta increase the number by. So you gotta refer to the stats, and then from there you can construct the weapon data for your weapon. And then once it's ready and you have projectile assigned to your weapon, you will be able to use the weapon by assigning it to the player's inventory. So for the whip, the trickiest part is just creating the whip weapon script, right? Once you do that, it's just a matter of assigning the weapon data, and then you can start using the whip. So what I like to do is whenever a new weapon is created, I like to just test it out by also creating a corresponding character data. So I just go to character. The whip character is called Antonio, right? Whip the starting weapon of Antonio. So I'll just create new character data. Sorry, wrong file type. So let me delete this guy, and then let's create a new character data as well. It's called Antonio. Or I can just duplicate the characters here. It's a lot simpler. I'll just duplicate Gennaro. Call him Antonio. And then just rename the character data. So you can use the lock and unlock button here to change. So whenever I lock, it's because I want to navigate to other folders and drag stuff inside. Yeah. So whenever I unlock is when I want to select another object. So the locking interface here is very useful. So I'll just change the name of the character to Antonio. And then create a new starting weapon. This is covered in part 15, right? And then you have a new character. You can set the stats to be a bit different. It's up to you if you want to do that. And then we can go to the scenes. Then we can go to menu. Let's save game. Before we save the game, let's just go to the inventory. And let's add the new weapon here. And then we should be able to level up. Make sure you save after making all these changes. And then in the character select screen, we can just head to the canvas and just make a duplicate. This will be whip character. I can just call him Antonio, right? And Antonio here, just edit the text. Antonio. And then just move him a little south. My character, I can rename this. This is Gennaro. And Gennaro is a Gennaro knife character. And then garlic is Paul, right? And this will be Paul, garlic. So then for the button here, you just gotta go to the character selector and just make sure that just go to the button actions and make sure that the character data here is not Gennaro, it's Antonio. Right? So then you play the game and you select Antonio, you'll get a whip. Yeah, the whip is here. So one thing I missed out for the whip. Okay, if you're wondering why the garlic is there, it's just because I didn't remove the garlic effect. So we just gotta remove the garlic effect here. So one thing you'll find is that the whip spawns on top of the player, which it's not supposed to happen. See that? Whip is working but it spawns on top of the player. So to rectify that, we have to go back to the whip here. And then we gotta change the spawn variance to be slightly in front. So I'm gonna set the spawn variance here to be something at 1.1. So what this does is this pushes the whip a little bit in front of the player. It's always gonna be measured from the right. So the right is always gonna be the correct direction. So if I set this value to 1.1, you will see the whip goes away. I set this to a higher value. This doesn't change immediately. Okay, because I have to refresh the game to see the changes. Because this is a scriptable object, data is loaded into the character at runtime. So I gotta restart the game and just gotta find the right value here, and the whip will spawn. Yeah. So the whip is a weapon I like a lot because the whip, the whip goes both ways. So I've got to change the spawn variance here. Okay. Because the whip, when it's level 2, it doesn't spawn properly. So I think we've got to set the spawn variance for every level to be correct. And there we go. Why do we have only 3 weapons here? Shouldn't we have 4? Maybe there is a little bug that I'm having. Yeah, but there we go for the whip. Okay, it's pretty simple. So you just have to... Do you run out of weapons? The garlic is not showing up as well, because the garlic's max level is 2, is it? Oh wait, garlic is... Why is the garlic not showing up? Knife? The whip, how about the whip? The whip's max level is 2. But the garlic should show up, no? It's strange. Maybe we found another bug that we have to fix. Garlic, knife, whip. Knife's max level is 8, so it should be able to grow a lot more, right? Okay, let's try this again. I don't understand why we have a weapon missing when there should be 4 weapons. Shouldn't be 3. So there's 4 weapons if I max out the whip. This whip only has 2 levels at the moment. Whip goes missing. And the knife as well doesn't show up. The knife should be showing up. Such an annoying thing, huh? So now the knife shows up. Knife. So I'm gonna do a little bit more testing, but it looks like the weapons, when you max out the weapon, it hides the slot, which it shouldn't be doing. But we'll get back to this. I'll look into this after the stream, and then we will see if there are bugs that need to be fixed. Then we will have to update the article and then maybe re-record certain parts. Okay, but the focus here is on the whip. Okay, and now the whip is working perfectly. So we are left with a couple more weapons. We are left with the lightning ring, another one of my favorites, and then the axe, and then the soul eater. So I'm gonna go grab myself a cup of caffeine before I continue with this part. And then when we come back, we'll finish up the rest of the weapons, and then we'll just test the weapon spawning system to make sure that everything is in order. And then once everything is in order, then we're done for the day. So stay tuned, I'll be back in 15 minutes.
Next level. Next level.
haven't had family time in a while.
Oh, what should we do?
Let's have a staycation. Or maybe a cruise. Daddy, what do you want?
I'm fine with anything. I just want time with my kids.
Thanks, Daddy.
We should also thank Esso for our Smiles Day Out. From now till 31st March, stand to win an exciting experience with every $70 spent on Esso Synergy Fuels.
Register now at essosmiles.com.sg.
Esso, every smile a reward.
Music soldier.
So let's continue now that I've got my cup of tea, and once I get a couple of sips, I'll get a caffeine rush and finish up the rest in part 16. Popeye has spinach, and I have tea. Tea is much better than spinach. Tastes better, smells better, and well, spinach is probably healthier, right? Not sure if it gets you strong though. So where did we leave off? We found a bug, right, with the system where if we fully level the weapon, then the slot becomes occupied permanently. So we're probably gonna fix that after finish part 16. So the next weapon that we have lined up is actually the lightning ring, which is right here. It's one of my favorite weapons to create during the stream. If you were to watch this video, you would see how much fun I had playing around with creating a lightning bolt. I don't know why, man. It's just a lot of fun to create lightning bolts here. Yeah, so I have the effect right here, but you're gonna have to create it yourself unless you want to download our project files from Patreon. So let me just show you the effect here. It's under project, no, not under projectiles. Where is it under? It's under VFX and then lightning ring VFX. Looks like that. Oh, where is it? Looks like that. It's a pretty neat effect if I say so myself. So it's probably the most polished effect that I've created. Like the rest of the effects, like the whip is fine, but you know, usually when you create effects, you have to create an effect for the enemies that I hit as well. And then for this one, okay, never mind, I'm going on a tangent. We can talk about creating effects maybe in a separate stream or something. Yeah, so for this stream, it's more oriented towards coding, so I don't want to get myself sidetracked too much. So the first thing that the guide says is to create the lightning ring effect. So you just gotta follow this tutorial. It's free for everyone. Just find it in our channel. And if you're watching the video for part 16 later, the link's gonna appear somewhere. Top of the video, top right probably. So once you create the effect, which we already have, you will have to create a lightning ring weapon script. So the lightning ring weapon script, let me just grab the script and drop it into the project first. Then we'll run through as usual the script, what it does, and what are the main differences from the script. So this is called lightning ring weapon. As usual, once you create the class, and if you inherit from weapon, so either you can inherit from weapon or any other weapons. So in our case here, we're inheriting from projectile weapon. This gives us the option to, of course, when we create the scriptable object, this gives us the option to select a new kind of weapon, right? So I think I didn't save this, that's why. So let me just save this. And once you parent it to a weapon, some kind of weapon, drop down will allow you to select lightning ring weapon. So we just have to run through the script over here to get to see why this is coded the way it does. It's a projectile weapon, same as the whip, same as the and the knife. Why do we use a projectile weapon? Again, because the projectile weapon has two things. It fires a projectile and it has a cooldown system. So whenever we have a cooldown system with our weapon, we will want to use the projectile weapon as a result. So with the lightning ring, right, the functionality is slightly different from usual. In what sense? In the sense that it doesn't fire a projectile, even though it's called a projectile weapon. So what it does is it just spawns a lightning bolt on top of the enemy, and then it just damages the enemy instantaneously. So the attack function is a little bit different from the usual one. Did I highlight the changes? Okay, so lightning ring is simpler to explain in the whip, according to myself in the article. This is the same as the projectile weapon. So what's different about the lightning ring is that whenever it cools down, instead of spawning a projectile to fire, notice that we didn't create a projectile for the lightning ring. Yeah, we only created a heat effect. So for the lightning ring, once it's cooled down, what we do is we just find all the enemies inside the scene. It's a little bit of it's gonna be a little bit expensive, but we find every enemy in the scene, and then after that we increase the cooldown, and then we set the current attack count. So for example, lightning ring, if you have say 2 bolts, then the current attack count will be set to 2. So then it will strike twice, right? So then every time the lightning ring fires, it will pick an enemy, and then after it picks an enemy, it will call this function called damage area. Pick enemy also is a function here that randomly picks an enemy on the screen. So what pick enemy does here is that, so when the weapon is cooled down, notice that the lightning ring has all selected enemies here. It's a list of all the enemies on the scene. Yeah, so when we get all the selected enemies, what's going to happen then is that we'll pick one enemy, and then we'll remove the enemy from the list. This is so that if you have one enemy only, the lightning ring will not strike it twice. Yeah, so we maintain a list of all the enemies in the scene, and then whenever an enemy is struck by the lightning, it'll be removed from the list until the next cooldown. So we pick an enemy, and then we remove the enemy from the selected enemies whenever we pick it. And okay, let me just see what's going on here. I forgot what I wrote here. So let's go line by line. The target will be the selected enemy, and then while we do not have a target, we and the number of enemies on the inside the all selected enemies is greater than 0. So this is just to prevent it from going into an infinite loop. If we run out of enemies and then we still don't have a target, if we do not have this condition here, this while loop will run forever. So then from here we will select one random enemy inside the all selected enemies array, or the list, not the array. And then before we strike the enemy though, so we only want enemies for on the screen, right? So whenever we pick an enemy, we are looping through all the enemies, right? We will pick a random enemy, and then we will get the renderer component of the enemy. The reason why we get the renderer component is because we want to check whether the enemy is visible to us. So if you notice, the lightning ring, right, in Vampire Survivors doesn't strike enemies outside of the screen. So then if an enemy is outside the screen, we can check this using is visible. If an enemy is outside the screen, it's visible, it goes to false. So then you won't be able to strike it. So this while loop will keep running. We will set the target, but then if the target here is outside the screen, then we will just remove the target, and then we will continue to try and find a target. Oh wait, I think there is a little mistake that I've made here, right? Because if we continue here, this will end the loop, because if we do this, lightning ring will strike an enemy outside of the scene. Let me organize my thoughts, yeah? So if the enemy is not visible, we will have to remove the enemy from the list, and then we will have to set target equals to null. The reason the target is set to null is because otherwise when we do continue will just redo the loop. Otherwise when we do continue, right, if target is not null, then the if target is filled up, right, then the while loop will exit, because the while loop can only run when target is not equals to is empty. Yeah, so we have to empty our target so that the loop will continue running. So let me just update the post as well. And then we have to test it out to make sure that the additional line doesn't break anything in our code. I never noticed this bug for a long time. Target goes to null. So again here, what we are doing here is we're just cycling through all the enemies, and then if the enemy is not eligible, we will remove it from the list. Then we will set target equals to null, so that we will try and find a new target again when we continue the loop. And then it keeps running and running and running until the target is valid. If the target is valid, this will fail. So why do we have an error? And then why do we check for error here is because in case the enemy that we find has no renderer, we will also the enemy has no renderer, it will be struck as well, right? So this actually should be if enemy has no renderer or renderer is not visible. Is that it? Has renderer and renderer is not visible. So if the enemy has no renderer, then the enemy will... Okay, so what I'm thinking of here is if we have a renderer here, right? What is renderer? We are checking if there is a renderer, because if there's no renderer and then we try and do this, then this will give us null reference exception. Because if this is null, then this will be null is visible, which gives us an error, which we don't want. So this is a problem though, because if there is a renderer, if the enemy has no renderer, the enemy will be selected as well. Because if the enemy has no renderer, then this will fail, and then the code will come here, and then we would have found our enemy, and we will return the enemy. But we don't want to strike enemy that is invisible but outside of the screen. So we have to make sure that if the renderer is null, we also have to make sure that the enemy is removed. And or if the enemy is not visible, we also have to remove it. So if this is true, then the code comes here. If this is false, the code doesn't come here. Check if the enemy is on screen. Let me just update the comments so that article is updated and everything. Check if the enemy is on screen. If the enemy is missing a renderer, check whether screen or... So I'll just add these comments onto the article as well. So this will be... Let me just run this through ChatGPT here, because it's much faster than testing code out. What am I gonna ask him, or her, or it? Depending on which, I don't know which pronoun, because it's a thing here. Okay, why am I talking about pronouns? Silly me. Will this code cause a null reference exception? It's not null, but does not have a renderer component, then target is not null. If this is null, give me a solution. R is not equals to null. How about this? So if there is no renderer, it means I gotta do something like this, huh? Error and error is not equal. How about this? Because if R is null, the second part of the condition will not be evaluated due to short circuiting. Will this cause a null reference? Solution cause null reference. Please don't pender. Sometimes ChatGPT tells you that you are right even though you're wrong. That's why I'm asking him to not pander to me. suggested solution I provide. But I want this or maybe I can simplify this logic. I can't see how this is causing, or how this will cause a null reference exception. But I guess we can trust ChatGPT. So if R is not equals to null, which means that if R exists, this always works. It's always works. So this is all will basically to a null reference. Prints are visible only runs when R can't believe it. Look at ChatGPT. It's just pandering to me. It's saying that I'm wrong and saying I'm correct again afterwards, even though I'm giving the same whatever. Gosh. So this works, right? Like logically. So for those of you who are confused about what I'm talking about, this example here, right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to avoid a null reference exception. What is a null reference exception? It is when R is equals to null, because when R is equals to null, I'll get null is visible. Okay, I have a video about null reference exceptions in the channel. It's somewhere in the channel. It's very useful because null reference exception is one of the most common errors that coders get, and it's very important to fix them because it means that a part of your code is not working. Whenever you get a null reference, like one block of your code just stops working. Yeah, and then if you get a lot of them, then your project can just break down. So what I'm trying to do here is so the code cannot get here. I must make sure the code doesn't get here when this is null. And the way I'm doing this is I'm checking whether R is null. If R is null, so if I put an exclamation mark R here, I'm checking if R is null. It's a short form. So if R is not null, which means if this is true, the code automatically comes here. Sorry, this is R is null. So if R is null, the code automatically comes here. If R is not null, meaning if there is something in R, then this becomes false, right? Because if we are checking if R exists, we will check like that. So here we are saying if R doesn't exist, then we will come here, right? So if R exists, then we will have to check against this condition. This is an OR. So this double bar here means if this or this, right? So if something exists here, then we have to check the other condition to check whether this whole thing runs, because either one of them has to be true. So if this is true, we won't have to check this. So if R has something, then this will be false. Then we have to check whether R is visible. So this shouldn't cause any null reference exceptions. Later we will test it out. It's just a minor little edit. I'm real careful about null reference exceptions because again they are a pain in the butt, pain in the ass. Can I say ass? Hope I can say ass. So we have some, I noticed we have some new chats. Okay, so Nilabine, you mentioned that we can check if they're within a certain radius, right? That's an idea. So what we have here is why did I just search the entire map? Number one, because when I was coding this I got lazy, alright? That's number one. Number two is if you wanted to check if they're within a certain radius, you would still have to Oh, actually you can just do something like this, right? You can just get all the colliders. and then enemies, and then you can do something like physics to the overlap circle. So this is one more option that we can try. So why I chose to select everything in the scene is because anyway, when you do overlap circle, right, Unity will check against every object in the scene. So either way, we can't escape checking through against every object in the scene. Maybe there are some optimizations that will cause this to be faster. Yeah, but this is definitely an option. I'm not sure if it'll be faster or slower. I think it depends on the exact setup of your scene. And if it's a small scene, I think this probably will be faster. Because if we do it this way and we filter it ourselves using the visibility, then we are not checking for, we don't have to do math calculations to check for distance and check for overlapping spheres and stuff. So by doing this, we are reducing the number of collision checks that we have. So it might be faster, I'm not entirely sure about that. But definitely the overlap circle thing, if you're having a bigger map, the overlap circle thing probably is going to be faster. So it depends on the situation. So, okay, where was I? So, I was explaining how the pick enemy works, right? So, it just picks the enemy and then removes the enemy from the list of selected enemies. And then while we are picking an enemy, if we find any enemies that are not eligible to be selected, we will remove them anyway and then continue the loop. That's what the pick enemy function does. And then in damage area here, what's happening is that, oh, finally I use overlap circle all. And then here we're just picking. So once we pick a position to strike, because lightning ring actually deals damage in an area, so then over here a function is created that picks all the enemies in a small circle around the enemy, and then it deals damage to them. Yeah, so whenever you do overlap circle, you have to grab the collider. Then from the collider, you can find the enemy stats object. And then here we check if the enemy stats object is found. Then we do a take damage. Again, this little check here is to make sure that ES is never null. Because if ES is null, which means that you cannot find the enemy stats in all the objects that you overlap, then you will get a null reference exception. Do note that when you do an overlap circle, all you will pick everything in the radius, not just the enemies. So this is pretty essential because this allows us to filter out only the enemies. Because when you strike the lightning, when the lightning strikes, you will also pick other things like say the ground, like treasure chests, or like your own garlic controller and whatever that has a collider will be picked. So it's really important that you filter out only the enemy stats and then you just do a check. Yeah, so you don't get null reference right here. So I think that's it for the lightning ring weapon. We can test this out. Let's create the lightning ring weapon data. Lightning ring. And lightning ring weapon here. Let's pick a sprite. Let's lock this. And can pick a suitable sprite. I had a very nice sprite for lightning ring. I'm not sure I forgot which one I used. I think it was this. Then max level, I'm just gonna set it 2 at the moment because I don't want to fill up a whole bunch of descriptions and stats and stuff. Lightning ring. And then damage is 15. Wow, it used a lot of damage. Strikes at random enemies. That's the description. Strikes at random enemies. No projectile for the lightning ring. No aura as well, just a hit effect. So we just have to head over to our prefabs, wherever you store your lightning ring effect, the lightning strike, and then just put it under hit effect. And lifespan, I think we can leave it at 0, right? That is how long the projectile lasts if it doesn't hit anything. So our lightning ring doesn't have a projectile, so we don't have to worry about the lifespan. Damage is 15, area is 1. Damage is 15, area is 1. Speed doesn't matter really because no projectile. Number is 2. Amount is number, right? So area of effect doesn't matter. Cooldown is 4.5. What else do we have? Projectile interval is 0.05. So if you notice, the lightning bolts don't come together. One comes first, and then after a short delay, the other one comes. And this is because there is a projectile interval. Pull limit is how many projectiles can exist at one time. Again, this is not a projectile, so doesn't really matter, but the equivalent to that is max instances here. Let's check if there's any knockback. There's a knockback of 1, and that's about it. So we can add some variance as well, you know, so this deals 15 to 17 damage because we have a variance of 2. Up to you if you want to add variance. I'm just going to add level 2 as well. And fires 1 more projectile, so level 2 is easy to set up. Fires 1 more projectile, we don't have to replace anything. Just increase the number by... And let's head over to... Let's create a character for Lightning Ring then. A Lightning Ring would be... Character would be undescribable objects characters. And then again we... It's an advertisement playing.
Esso, every smile a reward.
Yes, the advertisement was playing. So we just gotta open up the folder here, and then we just duplicate the character from here, because we can't do it from here. I can't do a Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. If I could, I would have done it. So right click, show an explorer, and then you just copy one of the assets here. Then what's the name of the Lightning Ring character? Starting weapon of Porta Ladonna. So Porta Ladonna. Unlock this. Porta Ladonna. And Lightning Ring. The stats, you can leave it as it is, doesn't matter. And we've got a character selector. In the canvas, we can just add Porta Ladonna over to here. So actually in the Patreon files, I put Porta Ladonna on top, so I'm just going to do that as well. And then for the X, later we'll put the X character at the bottom. Just making sure to centralize our character here. I mean the box, not the character. What am I saying? Porta Ladonna. Then text will be Porta Ladonna and Lightning Ring character. Finally, for the button itself, character data will be Porta Ladonna. And when we click on this, we should get a character with the Lightning Ring. We start game. And it's working. So with our weapon system, can you see how quickly we can set up new weapons? It's pretty cool, right? So it's no longer, you know, we gotta do up a lot of prefabs. The main thing we gotta do is just a script for the weapon. And then you just gotta set up the weapon data, and then you are just off. It's just a very quick way of creating weapons. So as usual, so those of you who want to get familiar with the system, what you can do is you can try and start creating your own weapons as well. And if you are successful, I would really appreciate it if you head over to our forums. I'm gonna put a link somewhere in the video later on. Go to our forums and then just post how you created the weapon. It's mainly the script that we want, right? Because really there's not a lot of scripting that you have to do with this new system. The only script that you have to write really is the script for the weapon behavior, which are these. So with every weapon we write one script, and that's really about it, because a weapon usually has a projectile and aura. So then you just gotta create the projectile, the aura prefab or the hit effect, and then add the weapon data, and then create a script to manage how the weapon behaves. So Yeah, I would say it's a much more efficient way of handling weapons in Vampire Survivors. I think now it's a lot of fun, a lot more fun to create weapons. So the last weapon we are looking at creating happens to be the simplest weapon of them all, is the axe. Actually, it's not the last, I'm sorry, second last weapon. So for the axe, so there is a question by UASD. How do you handle collisions with enemies in terms of the physics? That was actually done by Xavier, so not very clear on that, but we can just have a look at the build and we can reverse engineer, or rather we can just look at what happens in the game to see how collision is handled. So if I'm not wrong, I'm pretty sure that collision is handled by Unity's system. So the player character, for example, right? How do I know that? Because the player character has a rigid body here, and then it has a box slider as well. So the collision is handled entirely by Unity. There is no special system that we've created, even for the enemies as well. The enemies has a box slider. So the enemies themselves are also handled. The collision is handled also by Unity. So the only thing the enemy doesn't have is the rigid bodies, but that's fine because for rigid bodies to work, we only need one character to have a rigid body. So if the character has a rigid body, the enemies don't need a rigid body. This may change in the future if we have, for example, the enemies being able to run into walls and stuff. Then we will need to add a rigid body to the enemies. But for now, there is no need because our map is infinite. So the long story short is, there is nothing special that we do for collision in this series. We simply use Unity's system. We use box colliders and all the different collider 2Ds and rigid body 2Ds to handle collisions. If you want to have the enemies, right? Because enemies, I have some posts in the forums where viewers were asking, how do you make the enemies collide with one another? Very simple actually. If you want to make the enemies collide with one another, just add a rigid body to them. So right now, if you put multiple enemies together, they don't collide with one another. So I've just duplicated the back. You will see they overlap. See that? And this overlap is, well, it's because there are no rigid bodies. The enemy has no rigid body. So if I was to, let me just get an enemy on the screen, and I'll show this to you. If I was to get an enemy on the screen, and let's say if I were to duplicate this enemy, and then for both of them, if I would add a rigid body, like this, and this guy as well. So once there is a rigid body, you will see that the enemy will separate. See that? That's because with rigid bodies, the enemies now collide with one another. So if you wanted to fix enemies overlapping, this is how you will fix it. Just add a rigid body to them. And probably if you do that, you want to reduce the box slider on the enemy as well, so that they don't, so that they don't push each other apart like too much. I hope my answer makes sense. If you add a rigid body to enemies, one problem you'll have is they will become susceptible to gravity as well, because we have gravity in this project, and then we would have to let me show you what I mean. So if I add a rigid body to the enemy, you will see the enemy will start falling. Let me just get more enemies on the screen and I can show this to you. This lightning ring is too potent, or I can just select another weapon, say knife. So if I were to add a rigid body to the enemy, I'm just pausing the game and just modifying the enemies here like that. Enemy will start falling. The reason for that is because the enemy rigid body has to have gravity scale set to 0. Otherwise, the enemy will get affected by gravity. Where's the enemy now, huh? Why is he flying everywhere? let's try this again, yeah. Let's get an enemy and then we add a rigid body to it and then set the gravity scale to 0. So we're gonna get this poor bat here. Add a rigid body. And gravity scale here, if you set it to 0, then you will not get pulled down by gravity. But the moment you have a gravity scale, he just starts dropping. Yeah, maybe you find it funny. I will find it pretty funny. Yeah, but I hope that answered your question. The long and that's a pretty long answer, but there you go. Okay, next weapon that we have is the, let me update this. Our next weapon is the axe. Axe will be the simplest of all the weapons. So the axe is supposed to, I think in the update they probably changed the behavior of the axe. I'm not sure whether they did, because when I was playing the game in the past, right, the axes, they spawn like that. So they spawn in a cascade like you see on the screen right now. When I was playing recently though, the axes were spawning differently. They were spawning like this. The axe was, one was going forward, one was going back. So we're gonna use the old version. Hope my memory serves me correctly, because this was what I remember before I played the game recently. I played the game for like 10 hours max, really. But this was what I remembered. So we're gonna create this way of the axe spawning. So for the axe, clearly it will be a projectile weapon, right? No points for guessing what the axe is going to be. So here is the script for the axe. Oh, so before we create the weapon data and before we create the script, the first thing of course we have to do is we gotta create the weapon projectile. So for the axe projectile, it's a prefab and projectiles, and you see there will be a knife projectile, there will be an axe projectile, there will be a whip projectile, right? So the axe projectile is just a regular axe. Yeah, you just grab the axe sprite. So for me, what I've done is I've just given it a circle collider, and then because it doesn't matter what the rotation of the axe is, right? I've just left it diagonal. But if the rotation matters, like for example for the knife, notice that I've put the sprite like that. So the default rotation of the knife sprite is actually 45 degrees, but I've made sure to align it to the right, because if the alignment of the weapon matters, you always have to face the weapon to the right. So in most engines, the right direction, which is this direction, will be 0 degrees. Yeah, but because for the axe, it just rotates around, doesn't really matter where it's facing, so I didn't bother to modify the rotation of the axe to make it face to the right. Yeah, so I just added a circle collider, and then it just flies around, and then it just lands. If it lands on something, then it deals damage, right? And for the projectile itself, what I've done was just given it a rotation speed of minus 180 degrees, so that when it flies out, it swirls around like that. And I think that's about it. So you have a rigid body as well. The rigid body is there because we want the gravity to affect the axe. Yes, so we have a rotation speed, and then we just fire the axe upwards, and then we let gravity do its job. Make sense? Then we don't have to calculate it up. Yeah, so with physics engines, since Unity has a physics engine, there is no sense for us to calculate the travel arc of the axe, and then that requires a lot of math, and it's well, we can ask ChatGPT to do it for us, but then curves are always very tricky to work with. So whenever we can let physics do the job, I'm more than happy to do that. So the projectile is just a regular projectile, just like a knife, except it has a circle collider. That's about it. So once the projectile is created, we will head over and create the weapon data as well. Weapon data will be same as usual. sorry, before we create a weapon data, we have to set up the X weapon script, right? So let me just run through the X weapon script. So a couple of questions. Hi Autumn Maple. Thanks for pointing out the bugs on the part 15 video. We fixed a couple of them earlier in the stream, so you can check it out. So especially the one where the weapon repeats itself, or you can check out our article as well. Articles and blog just got posted. Okay, so Autumn Maple, for if you want to reduce the cooldown, you have to put a negative number. That's a great observation. I coded that and I forgot about that myself. So I put positive numbers as well and noticed the cooldown was increasing. So we have to put a negative number. That's right. Okay, so let's get back to the X. For the X weapon, let's just go through the script together. Let me just create the script here, and X weapon. So again, X weapon inherits from projectile weapon. Why? Because it has a cooldown, right? So whenever it cools down, it fires a projectile. That is why we inherit from the projectile weapon. So there are two things that we do. The X is probably the simplest of all the weapons because we just have to shoot the X upwards. No matter where we are moving, we just shoot it upwards. And then we let gravity do the rest of the work. So if you recall in the projectile weapon script, right, under the attack function, there are two other functions that are called. One of it is get spawn angle, and then the other one is get spawn offset. Get spawn offset determines where the projectile spawns, and we have the spawn variance, right? So if this is our character, so then if you set the spawn variance to be, let's say, a small square like this, then the spawn offset basically picks a random point within this box here to spawn the projectile. So for weapons that do not have any spawn variance, it will just spawn at the center of the character. For weapons with spawn variance, get spawn offset will randomly generate a point within this box over here. And for the knife as well, because the knife, when you're moving diagonally, the spawn variance is rotated 45 degrees or 90 degrees or whatever, depending on where you're moving towards. So the spawn variance box actually rotates depending on where your character is moving towards. So what we want to do is we want to override these two functions in the X weapon because we do not want the spawn offset to be affected by the angle. That's the first thing, so the box doesn't rotate. Second thing is you want the spawn angle to always be upwards. So the first function we override is the spawn angle function, wherein we just set the rotation of the X to be 90 degrees. So in Unity, because of the way that sine and cosine and arctangent, mainly arctangent is how you calculate the angle of a vector. Alright, so if you in Unity, right, because of the way trigonometry works, this will always be 0 degrees. So if we want the X to fire upwards, we will always set the X to be 90 degrees. And then downwards will be minus 90 degrees. And then backwards will be both 180 as well as minus 180 because it's the same thing, right? So then we want the X to go upwards. So then what we are doing here is we're setting the... So actually what we want to do really here is just to return 90 degrees. But then we also want the X to cascade forwards, if you know what I mean. Okay, you don't know what I mean, but if you look at the X that we have over here, right, the X is not just all flying upwards. Because the first X that we have, only the first X is flying upwards. So we want our X's to go like this. This first one goes upwards, second one goes forwards. So the second one will be, say, 85 degrees. Third one will go a little bit more forward, and then the third one will be 80 degrees. And then the fourth one will be 75, 70, and so on. So what we'll get is you'll get X's that go like this, like this, like this, like this. Yeah. So then to that end, we will have to take that into account and get spawn angle. And how we do that is, remember that in projectile weapon, right, the number of projectiles that is currently being fired, or rather the number of projectiles that's left, is tracked by current attack count. So let's say if my weapon fires 4 projectiles, right, I can get the 4 projectiles minus current attack count to get which projectile I am currently at. So for example, if I have 3 more projectiles left and I know that my weapon fires 4 projectiles, this means that if you take the total minus the remaining, you will get the number of projectiles that has fired. I hope that makes sense. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm getting current stats number. This is the total number of projectiles that is supposed to be fired. This is how many projectiles are left. Yeah, so from there I can get a number, and this number will go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So then what we want to do is, if current attack count is greater than 0, then we will count how many projectiles have fired. If there is no current attack count, meaning that if no attack is being fired, now we will just set offset to be 0. So current attack count can also be 0 if the number of projectiles that your weapon fires is 1. So if you fire 1x, you just want it to fly upwards, right? So what you get here essentially is you get 90, and then you get 90 being multiplied by 5 times offset. This means that, let's not care about this part here first. Okay, so it's just 90 minus 5 times something. So the second projectile will be 85 because offset will be 1. So 1 times 5 is 5, and then 5 minus 90 will give us 85. And then so on and so forth, right? So what this does is this actually gets us the facing of the character. So if I'm facing left, then I want the angle to actually increase. If you look at this diagram again, if I'm moving to the left, I want the axis to spawn like that. Here, 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 and so on. So instead of going from 90 to 85 to 80, it will go from 90 to 95 to 100, then to 105, and so on. So then how this changes things is that the mathf.sign will actually get us a positive value if I'm moving to the right, and if it's moving to the left, it will give us a negative value. So this will give us -1, or it will give us a +1. So if it gives us +1, this will be 90 minus 5 times offset. Whereas if it gives us a -1, this will give us 90 minus minus, which becomes a plus. Okay, which gives us 90 plus 5 times offset. So this is what's going on with the math here. Get spawn offset is basically just the same thing as projectile weapon, except that you remove the rotation. It's missing the rotation. The reason is because we do not need the rotation to factor into the weapon. Because otherwise, if you move upwards, because if we rotated the spawn box, right, if you move upwards, then the X will spawn like that. And if you move, let's say 45 degrees, then the X will spawn like that. We don't want that. So we just remove the rotation portion of the get spawn offset right here. So we will probably release a video about quaternions sometime in the future as well, just to explain how quaternions work and why quaternions are used the way they do. Because I think a lot of beginning coders they get really confused about how quaternions work and just about how to generate angles in Unity, right? Because quaternions are so arcane, whereas you know, if you were to measure angles in X, Y, Z, it's just so much easier to do. So there's actually in an earlier stream, I think it was number 13 or number 12, where there was a portion where we talked about quaternions. We're gonna plug this out, add some new information, some spice, some sugar, and whatever. We'll turn it into a video and then we'll post it on our channel. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And if we have the bandwidth, also together with an article explaining what quaternions are. So once we get the X weapon set up, again we can create a weapon data for the X, and then we are ready to go for the X. So let us just go to weapons, create, and then weapon data for this X. Behavior will be X weapon. Sprite, just select a suitable one. I'm gonna go with the 2X because that was what I've been using. Max level, I'm just gonna set it to X. I'll just give it a random description. Yeah, deals a lot of damage. And projectile. Go over to prefabs, weapons, projectiles. X projectile, aura, and particle system, we'll leave it empty. Spawn variance is empty. Then lifespan, just put say maybe 5. Right, because the X needs to hang around for a little bit. The X deals a lot of damage. Give it some variance. Area, what's the area? Area is 1, speed is 1, amount is 1, everything is 1. So for the speed, we probably have to set it a bit high because our unit scales are different from Vampire Supply. Area is 1. Cooldown is... what's the cooldown? 4.0. 4. Interval is 0.2. How about knockback? Knockback is 1. Number is 1, right? Then we just increase it over time. There's critical multiplier as well. Okay, I don't know what that is. We will have to come back to this. If you want to add critical hits to the game, you will have to come back to the code here. Piercing is just 1, right? Not wrong. Pierces through 3 objects actually. So piercing is 3. Max instances, just give it a high number, doesn't really matter what the number is. Level 2, more don't care about the description anymore, yeah. You can copy it from the wiki. Fires 1 more projectile. Fires 1 more projectile. As usual, because the level up information is supposed to contain the changes, just leave everything at 0 and set number to 1. And when we level up the X to level 2, you get 2 X's, and so on and so forth, right? So with the X set up, we can again do the same thing. We can just go back to the character select screen. And then we can duplicate one of our characters here, the whip character. And then let's see what the X character is called. It's called Llama Ladonna. That's the character, right? So move Llama Ladonna here. I'll get it to align. Llama Ladonna. And Llama Ladonna X character. So then we align the X direction. To pole. So pole is 300, right? So we just make sure Llama Ladonna is 300 as well, so that the lines here align. And then of course, again you change the character that's selected. I forgot to create the character data. So scriptable object characters. Again, just duplicate the character, copy paste. Llama Ladonna. And then we change the weapon to, and finally we can select the character. So we've created 5 weapons. In the Patreon files we have 6, but the Fire 1 weapon doesn't really work the way it's supposed to. X weapon is right here. So the Fire 1 is coded a little bit wrongly, so I have to recode that. And I just haven't gotten around doing that. The Fire 1 weapon that we have currently fires at 3 different enemies, which is not how the Vampire Survivors 1 works. Vampire Survivors 1 fires 3 projectiles at a single enemy. So we need to do some math. It's a little bit similar to the X. So Perhaps I will post, if I were to get around to that, I will post it in the forums, the how to do that instructions. Yeah. So now we have the X. Of course, to get the X to work, or rather to get the X to be valid as a level up option, you will have to go to the game C and then just add the X into the available weapons slot. So we have a whip, we have an axe, and now we have to add the lightning ring as well. So they all become valid targets for level up. And that about wraps it up for the axe weapon. Okay, let's look at the chat to see what new questions. So regarding the collision physics, in my current system, I want the player to be able to mildly move enemies aside when colliding, and I don't want the enemies to move the player at all. This only works with rigid bodies when the enemies are moving. When the enemies are standing still and the player collides with them, they fly to eternity. Any idea how I can stop that? Okay, so UASD. What you can do is, let me know if this works. You can play around with the mass. So the mass affects how an enemy affects the player and how the player affects the enemy. So if you increase the mass of the player, the enemy will not be able to move you around. That's one solution. But if you don't want their motions to affect each other at all, wait, you want the player to mildly move enemies aside when colliding, and you don't want the enemies to move the player. I think this will be a little bit tricky. I'm thinking of, you probably have to code your own collision system for that then, because oh, I got it. So one way to do it is you set your player as okay, let me see how the movement is done. All right, and then from there I can so UASD, you will have to do a couple of things if you want to have those features that you want to have. So first, you have to set the player to have a kinematic rigid body. But once you do that, you will have to modify the player movement script as well, because you will no longer be able to use RB.velocity to move the player around. You have to manually move the player around. So if you set the player character to a kinematic, what's going to happen is that they are not going to be able to be pushed around, but they can push things around. And then for your enemies, right, you can just set them to be dynamic. Okay, so if you need some help with the scripts for the player movement, you can post your issue on the forum. So let me just write down the instructions for you on the chat, because this is a little bit more complex. So if you want the player to be able to push the enemies around, you will need player to have a kinematic rigid body, while the enemies will have a dynamic rigid body. However, because of, check out the chat, yeah, I'm writing in the chat now. Because of the way player movement is coded, you will also need to modify it to work with kinematic rigid body. i.e., you can no longer use RB. So if you need help with modifying the player movement script, you can post in the forums and respond to you as soon as possible. Hope that's a satisfactory answer. So if you want to learn more about kinematic rigid bodies as well, we have an article on the chat, not chat, sorry. We have an article on the blog if you just go to our blog and just search for kinematic, you will be able to find some results. You can check what is kinematic rigid body and how it's used. This is worth a read. There are some examples as well that you can check out that helps to illustrate what kinematics do. So it's a very picturesque article, if I say so myself. A lot of video examples and imagery. Yeah, just have a read. Kinematics are very important when you're working with physics in all games, because kinematics will affect the motion of your objects. Okay, so with that answer, let's move on with our part 16 video. So all of this stuff I've explained in my own way using Paint right here. Let's share my screen properly. So the last weapon that we are going to be creating is the Soul Eater. For the Soul Eater, same thing. The first thing we're going to be doing is create. So the Soul Eater is just a glorified garlic, so it's going to be pretty easy to create. So it's just a garlic aura, but bigger, and then with a different effect. So this is how the Soul Eater looks like. Why is there a bed on the map? So Soul Eater looks like this. You can check out the YouTube video on how to create the effect. So same components as the garlic aura. The only difference is that it's just big. It's really big, you know, because it affects a big area. Otherwise, everything else is the same. So then once we have the Soul Eater aura, the only thing we gotta do is just, because it uses the aura weapon script, right? So you don't have to write any new scripts for the Soul Eater. So we just have to go to scriptable objects, weapons, and then just create a new Soul Eater weapon. So yeah, and it'll be an aura weapon just like the garlic. And because we've made the aura big, right, we don't have to set the area to be a very big size as well. Area can just be 1. So then next level will be 1. Soul Eater. Description, garlic on steroids. Aura will be our Soul Eater aura prefab, right? So prefabs, weapons, auras, Soul Eater. Spawn variant is 0 because they're not applicable to auras. And then we just gotta grab the sets from the wiki. So it deals 20 damage. Area is big, but what do we care, right? Because we already have the area set up in our prefab. So damage is 20, maybe a variance of 5, right? Area would be just 1 because we've already made the effect big. Speed is 0, cooldown is 1 second. Wow, it's fast. No projectile interval, knockback, I think it's just 1, right? No knockback, 0. Number is, don't have to care about number. Piercing, we don't have to care about it because it's not projectile. Next instances, it's not used at the moment, just leave it at 0, doesn't really matter. So you just gotta set the damage and damage variance, really that's all about it. Because only 1 level, so there's no linear growth, no random growth. And then let's just add a sprite to the Soul Eater. Let's just find a random. Yeah, Soul Eater can just be this buckler, right? Just gonna use this as Soul Eater. So for the Soul Eater to work, we will need to have our weapons set up as well. So the garlic needs to have evolution data added to it. Over here it's already done. So then you just gotta name the evolution data, and then how does it activate? Does it activate automatically? Does it activate only when you pick up a treasure chest? What does it consume? Does it consume weapons and passives, or does it consume only weapons? Alright, so if you remember in Vampire Survivors, when you evolve your weapon, the passive stays, but the weapon goes away. Right? So then we will have to get our weapons to the appropriate level, and then after that get a treasure chest, and then this will get the weapon to evolve. So the evolution level here, I'm gonna set it to a lower value at the moment. So what this evolution level does is garlic needs to be level 8 to be able to evolve into Soul Eater. I'll reduce this to level 2, and then the catalyst over here will be a passive. And then the outcome, let's just assign Soul Eater here, level 1 Soul Eater. So for the passive, I'm just gonna very quickly create the Pomerola. Passives are easy to create because passives don't really have any special effects. So then you just gotta specify the stats that they give to the player when you receive the passive, right? So next level is gonna be 5, and then Pomerola, we just have to get an appropriate sprite for that. Under art, and then let's find nice little red sprite. I think we can use this one, this red gem here, be a great Pomerola. Evolution data, same thing, Soul Eater. So we just have to repeat these instructions over here. Consumes only the weapons, evolution level, let's set it to 2. The catalyst over here would be the garlic, right? Strippable objects, weapons, garlic. So I'll set the garlic to be level 2 as well, and we can evolve this, and then Soul Eater, level 1. So then for the base stats, Pomerola freezes, regeneration by 0.2, then recovery 0.2, then for the growth here, because we have 5 levels, level 2, so it's just all gonna be the same tech, right? And the same recovery as well. So I can actually just remove all the other elements here like that, and then just duplicate the elements. So passives are really easy to create, right? Because there's no code involved. It's all just stats. So you can do it really fast as opposed to the weapons. Yeah, so the key takeaway here is the evolution data you gotta set up in Pomerola. And you also gotta set up the same evolution data in the garlic. Right? So the garlic over here, you gotta find your Pomerola, and then assign it here, and then what's the evolution. So I'm just gonna set Pomerola and garlic to evolve both at level 2. So it's a lot easier for us to meet the conditions to evolve. And then once both sides are set, we can just start playing the game. And then we can just wait for the garlic and Pomerola to spawn. We can get them, and then we can evolve our weapon. So let's get garlic. Garlic. One more and Pomerola after that. So level 2 garlic. No Pomerola for me now. Character moves 10% faster. Give me a Pomerola, please. No experience gems. Terrible luck. Okay, let me just make things easier, alright? I'm just gonna remove all the other weapons for now. And just leave, oh, there's no Pomerola inside here, no wonder. Forgot to add this. So with lesser weapons now, we have more chance of getting the weapon that we want. We still get a whip over here. Pomerola, level 1. Pomerola. Level 2 Pomerola. Let's get garlic first. So once we get the requisite items, then we can go and try and take the treasure chest, and then this should give us the Soul Eater. But I haven't got the requisite items yet, so I can't go to treasure chest yet. My garlic is still level 1, so we've got to get it to be a higher level. So level 2 garlic. So once I've met the conditions to level up, to evolve my weapon, I can just head over to chest here, and then this gives me the Soul Eater. The scale of the Soul Eater seems to be off. This probably has to do with my effect, but you can see the evolution happening. What's going on with the scale though? Aura is here, particle system. Scale here is supposed to be 10, 10, 10. Okay, my bad. I think the problem is that for the Soul Eater, I will have to set the area inside here as well. My bad, my bad. Okay, so the area, because I set it too small, so the Soul Eater was a little bit whack. So let's try this again. So with the correct stats set to the Soul Eater, now I can try and evolve the weapon again. Garlic. Let's get garlic again. And now we have to get the Pomerola, right? Pomerola is not appearing for us. Let's try our luck. Still no Pomerola. Terrible luck. Terrible, terrible luck. Roller. Pomerola. So now we've got all the requisites. Look at the inventory as well. As I evolve the weapon, you see garlic will disappear and then Soul Eater will replace it. See that? And then now you have very strong weapon and you just move around and destroy everything. So that's weapon evolution for you. If you set the stats up for the Soul Eater correctly, make sure you give it a big area, then the entire thing will work properly. So with the Soul Eater setup, that's about it for this part of the series. So the Soul Eater is the last thing. And then after you're done, of course, just add the weapons to your inventory. So just like how I've been doing. So just go to the play inventory here and then just make sure available weapons here. Just add all the weapons in here so that you have a lot of choice about what weapons to choose from. Make sure you don't put the Soul Eater inside the available weapons though, otherwise you'll be able to get it by level. You don't want to be able to get a Soul Eater by level. Yeah. And of course, creating new characters, we've also done that. So that's in the menu scene, right? For every character that we have, we've created a new button for that. And then what else? So the next part, what we'll be doing is we'll be revisiting the player stats, because the passives, there are 17 player stats and we only implemented 6. So then we'll be implementing the rest of the stats and then tying them together with the weapons, and we should have more or less a weapon system that is done. After this part, I will not be covering any more weapons in the main series entry. So if you want more weapons, you can just post your requests on the forums. If you've managed to create any weapons yourself, please share them in the forums as well. They'll be much appreciated. So I probably will, we have to find a way to reward you and thank you for your work if you do post any of your weapon codes. But our forums are there for that, you know, for everyone to share whatever they've done and whatnot. So before I wrap up today's stream, right, we ran into an issue just now where if you max out a weapon, right, the slot doesn't appear anymore. So let's look into that and see what's going on there and see if we're able to fix that. Let's go back to the game scene, and I'm just gonna remove some of the weapons here, or rather I will reduce the max level of all the weapons. Ooh. And then from there we can start to see all these things, because the weapons will level up faster. One more projectile. So once the lightning ring hits the max level, right, we still get other weapons. Or is it just a sometimes stick? Because once we have a lot of weapons, it looks like the shield goes away, right? So here we have some missing weapons, even though we still have quite a few weapons that we're able to level up, right? We're missing some weapons. So if like we can put a passive here, right? Should be a passive here, but we don't get that. So sometimes you get 4, sometimes you don't, right? And I know this happens in Vampire Survivors as well, but we want it to happen by design, not by a bug. So let me see if I'm able to fix this. See, sometimes we get 2, sometimes we get a lot of them, sometimes we don't. See, you get 2 here, you don't get all of them. So this probably has to do with the way that the play inventory works. Perhaps inside here, so we loop through all available weapon upgrades. If we find a match, we pick a random weapon and we remove the weapon. So if the weapon is valid, it will turn on the upgrade panel. And if the weapon is max level, then I'll upgrade. So we have about half an hour left. Let's see if we're able to fix this issue. It'd be great if I'm able to fix it, otherwise I guess we have to leave it to the next stream. Fix this issue. Set event listener. I'm trying to think of a scenario where slot will be empty. The easiest way to replicate this bug would be for us to go to the player and then just remove all the weapons except for 3 of them, and then all the passives except for 2 of them. So then it will become very obvious that when you finish leveling one weapon, right? Then sometimes there'll be empty slots, which shouldn't happen. So like for example, the lightning ring, once I max it out, sometimes I'll get 3 slots instead of 4, which by now is not by design. So here I get 4, but then sometimes I get 3. Right? Depends on the RNG. See, I get 3 here, even though I still have 4 weapons that I can level, right? Because my knife, my garlic is level 1, my lightning ring is level 2. So I should always get a garlic here, but instead I'm not getting the garlic, which means the lightning ring is appearing. And then the garlic is not appearing. So pick a weapon upgrade, then remove it so that we don't get it twice. And then we pick the upgrade, we will turn on the slot. And then we do a break here. I think we shouldn't do a break here. We should change the chosen weapon upgrade, right? I think we should fix this. I know what the problem is already. So now whenever if the weapon is ready to max level, do not allow the upgrade, then we will have to also regenerate the upgrade option before we. Oh, hold on, but that's not a. Okay, let me just update the article with this issue, because I don't think we should fix it now. I plan to rewrite the entire function. If we fix it now, it'll just be a band-aid, and we will have to remove the code anyway. So let me just add this somewhere. There is a bug. There is a minor bug with the leveling the weapon upgrade window after leveling up, where if you have at least one fully leveled weapon, sometimes weapons drop. This has to do with how fly upgrade option work. We will be coding it to work more efficiently in the future part. I don't know if I should do it in the next part because I don't know if I have the time, because we have to tackle the stats. So we will be using the part back for. Okay, so we just leave it at that. So I've done what I wanted to do in today's stream. Let's see if there's any last questions before I wrap up for the day. It's pouring, it's raining cats and dogs at my place right now. I have to go and do some laundry, so I'm gonna end the stream a little bit earlier today. My clothes are all wet, so I'm gonna go and keep them. Thanks for joining, those of you who are here. I really appreciate your support as always. If you have any questions, as usual, leave a comment anywhere in one of our videos or go to our forums. If you need coding help, bugs, as usual, go to the forums and ask me anything. I will try and answer you guys ASAP as usual. Thanks for joining. The week ahead, still a long week, so but still. Thanks for your support. Yeah, have a good week ahead, and I'll see you